presidential debate ever, because Kamala Harris and Joe Biden have both called the coming administration, if they should win, the Harris-Biden ticket. So you're possibly looking at a president of the United States in judging. There is a lot to go over. Can somebody let me know where they are? I want to make sure that we get to Kingsbury Hall on time. There it is. Okay. So they haven't come out on the stage yet, and they're getting ready now to speak. Coming up after this, Donald Trump Jr. is going to be joining me for a few minutes. I just left a dinner with him, and so he's watching it here in Dallas, and he'll be joining us right after the debate. Also, we have Rubin and Allie Beth Stuckey and Steve Deace, who is going to take a look at the new poll that is coming out now from Rasmussen. Rasmussen is notoriously favorable to the president over the last few years. This one shows the president losing to Joe Biden, which has a lot of people freaked out. Steve has an interesting take on it. He is a former campaign manager, somebody who also has done a lot of polling for campaigns over the years, and he has an interesting take on that. As I was talking to some of the people of the campaign tonight, they're not sure what to make of everything that is going on. The polls, do we believe them? Do you not believe them? Why is the Biden campaign not door knocking? It's almost as if they know something that we don't know. They're taking a very cavalier approach to this election. Meanwhile, the Trump campaign is fighting for their life, and I believe the life of our republic. What's nice about tonight, if you look there on the set, you'll see what looks like two microphone stands almost on either side of the moderator, but those are actually the COVID shields. So there's no way COVID could get around or over those shields. It's like, we all know, you have to wear a mask when you walk into a restaurant, but once you're seated, COVID can't get you. A couple of things to watch for, because Mike Pence has to do the lifting here that Donald Trump didn't do in the last debate. I think Donald Trump was angry in the last debate, and I don't blame him, quite honestly. But tonight, Mike Pence, who was a former talk show host before he became governor and ran for office, he has got to not look like a regular politician and point out how radical Kamala Harris really is. And she is quite radical. She vigorously supports BLM and Antifa. In one of her first speeches as Biden's running mate, she actually called the BLM and Antifa, I believe, terrorists when they were burning cities, looting stores, and toppling statues. She said it was a coalition of conscience. If you've been watching any of my shows over the last 3 weeks, you know that that is a coalition that the Democrats need. So will he paint her and be able to paint her as who she really is? The moderator has just begun, so let's listen in as they give the ground rules and introduce the two candidates. I'm Susan Page of USA Today. It is my honor to moderate this debate, an important part of our democracy. In Kingsbury Hall tonight, we have a small and socially distant audience, and we've taken extra precautions during this pandemic. Among other things, everyone in the audience is required to wear a face mask, and the candidates will be seated 12 feet apart. The audience is enthusiastic about their candidates, but they've agreed to express that enthusiasm only twice, at the end of the debate and now when I introduce the candidates. Please welcome California Senator Kamala Harris and Vice President Mike Pence.
Thank you.
Senator Harris and Vice President Pence, thank you for being here. We're meeting as President Trump and the First Lady continue to undergo treatment in Washington after testing positive for COVID-19. We send our thoughts and prayers to them for their rapid and complete recovery and for the recovery of everyone afflicted by the coronavirus. The two campaigns and the Commission on Presidential Debates have agreed to the ground rules for tonight. I'm here to enforce them on behalf of the millions of Americans who are watching. One note, no one in either campaign or at the Commission or anywhere else has been told in advance what topics I'll raise or what questions I'll ask. This 90-minute debate will be divided into 9 segments of about 10 minutes each. I'll begin a segment by posing a question to each of you, sometimes the same question, sometimes a different question on the same topic. You will then have 2 minutes to answer without interruption by me or the other candidate. Then we'll take 6 minutes or so to discuss the issue. At that point, although there will always be more to say, we'll move on to the next topic. We want a debate that is lively, but Americans also deserve a discussion that is civil. These are tumultuous times, but we can and will have a respectful exchange about the big issues facing our nation. Let's begin with the ongoing pandemic that has cost our country so much. Senator Harris, the coronavirus is not under control. Over the past week, Johns Hopkins reports that 39 states have had more COVID cases over the past 7 days than in the week before. 9 states have set new records. Even if a vaccine is released soon, the next administration will face hard choices. What would a Biden administration do in January and February that a Trump administration wouldn't do? Would you impose new lockdowns for businesses and schools and hotspots? A federal mandate to wear masks? You have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Thank you, Susan. Well, the American people have witnessed what is the greatest failure of any presidential administration in the history of our country. And here are the facts. 210,000 dead people in our country in just the last several months. Over 7 million people who have contracted this disease. 1 in 5 businesses closed. We're looking at frontline workers who have been treated like sacrificial workers. We are looking at over 30 million people who in the last several months had to file for unemployment. And here's the thing. On January 28th, the Vice President and the President were informed about the nature of this pandemic. They were informed that it's lethal in consequence, that it is airborne, that it will affect young people, and that it would be contracted because it is airborne. And they knew what was happening, and they didn't tell you. Can you imagine if you knew on January 28th, as opposed to March 13th, what they knew, what you might have done to prepare? They knew and they covered it up. The president said it was a hoax. They minimized the seriousness of it. The president said, you're on one side of his ledger if you wear a mask, you're on the other side of his ledger if you don't. And in spite of all of that, today they still don't have a plan. They still don't have a plan. Well, Joe Biden does. And our plan is about what we need to do around a national strategy for contact tracing, for testing, for administration of the vaccine, and making sure that it will be free for all. That is the plan that Joe Biden has and that I have, knowing that we have to get a hold of what has been going on, and we need to save our country. And Joe Biden is the best leader to do that, and frankly, this administration has forfeited their right to re-election based on this.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, more than 210,000 Americans have died of COVID-19 since February. The U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population is higher than that of almost every other wealthy nation on earth. For instance, our death rate is 2.5 times that of Canada next door. You head the administration's coronavirus task force. Why is the U.S. death toll as a percentage of our population higher than that of almost every other wealthy country? and you have 2 minutes to respond without interruption.
Susan, thank you. And I want to thank the Commission and the University of Utah for hosting this event. And Senator Harris, it's a privilege to be on the stage with you. And our nation has gone through a very challenging time this year. But I want the American people to know that from the very first day, President Donald Trump has put the health of America first. Before, there were more than 5 cases in the United States, all people who had returned from China. President Donald Trump did what no other American president had ever done, and that was he suspended all travel from China, the second largest economy in the world. Now, Senator Joe Biden opposed that decision. He said it was xenophobic and hysterical. But I can tell you, having led the White House Coronavirus Task Force, that that decision alone by President Trump bought us invaluable time to stand up the greatest national mobilization since World War II. And I believe it saved hundreds of thousands of American lives. Because with that time, we were able to reinvent testing. More than 115 million tests have been done to date. We were able to see to the delivery of billions of supplies so our doctors and nurses had the resources support they needed. And we began, really, before the month of February was out, to develop a vaccine and to develop medicines and therapeutics that have been saving lives all along the way. And under President Trump's leadership, Operation Warp Speed, we believe we'll have literally tens of millions of doses of a vaccine before the end of this year. The reality is, when you look at the Biden plan, it reads an awful lot like what President Trump and I and our task force have been doing every step of the way. I mean, quite frankly, when I look at their plan that talks about advancing testing, creating new PPE, developing a vaccine, it looks a little bit like plagiarism, which is something Joe Biden knows a little bit about. And I think the American people know that this is a president who has put the health of America first, and the American people, I believe with my heart, can be proud of the sacrifices they have made. It's saved countless American lives.
Senator Harris, would you like to respond?
Absolutely. Whatever the vice president is claiming the administration has done, clearly it hasn't worked. When you're looking at over 210,000 dead bodies in our country, American lives that have been lost, families that are grieving that loss. And you know, the vice president is the head of the task force and knew on January 28th how serious this was. And then thanks to Bob Woodward, we learned that they knew about it. And then when that was exposed, the vice president said, when asked, well, why didn't y'all tell anybody? He said, because the president wanted people to remain calm.
Well, let's get
no, but Susan, this is important.
Susan,
I want to add, Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
I have to
I'm
weigh
speaking.
in.
Yeah, you can have 15 more seconds, and then we'll give the vice president a chance to respond.
So I want to ask the American people, how calm were you when you were panicked about where you're going to get your next roll of toilet paper? How calm were you when your kids were sent home from school and you didn't know when they could go back? How calm were you when your children couldn't see your parents because you were afraid they could kill them?
Let's give Vice President Pence a chance to respond. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute to respond.
You know, there's not a day gone by that I haven't thought of every American family that's lost a loved one. And I want all of you to know that you'll always be in our hearts and in our prayers. But when you say what the American people have done over these last 8 months hasn't worked, that's a great disservice to the sacrifices the American people have made. The reality, if I may finish, Senator, the reality is Dr. Fauci said everything that he told the president in the Oval Office, the president told the American people. Now, President Trump, I will tell you, has boundless confidence in the American people, and he always spoke with confidence that we'd get through this together. But when you say it hasn't worked, when Dr. Fauci and Dr. Birx and our medical experts came to us in the second week of March, they said if the president didn't take the unprecedented step of shutting down roughly half of the American economy, that we could lose 2.2 million Americans. But that's the reality.
Thank you.
They also said to us,
President
if we
Pence.
did everything right, Susan, we could still lose more than 200,000 Americans.
Vice President
now, one
Pence.
life lost is too many, Susan. But the American people, I believe, deserve credit for the sacrifices that they have made, putting the health of their family and their neighbors first, our doctors, our nurses, our first responders.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And I'm going to speak up on behalf of what the American people have done.
Vice President Pence, you were in the front row in a Rose Garden event 11 days ago at what seems to have been a super spreader event for senior administration and congressional officials. No social distancing, few masks, and now a cluster of coronavirus cases among those who were there. How can you expect Americans to follow the administration's safety guidelines to protect themselves from COVID when you at the White House have not been doing so?
Well, the American people have demonstrated over the last 8 months that when given the facts, they're willing to put the health of their families and their neighbors and people they don't even know first. And President Trump and I have great confidence in the American people and their ability to take that information and put it into practice. In the height of the epidemic, when we were losing a heartbreaking number of 2,500 Americans a day, we surged resources to New Jersey and New York and New Orleans and Detroit. We told the American people what needed to be done, and the American people made the sacrifices. When the outbreak in the Sun Belt happened this summer, again, Americans stepped forward. But the reality is the work of the President of the United States goes on. A vacancy on the Supreme Court of the United States has come upon us, and the President introduced Judge Amy Coney Barrett.
Thank you, Vice President.
At that, if I may say, that Rose Garden event, there's been a great deal of speculation about it. My wife Karen and I were there and honored to be there. Many of the people who were at that event, Susan, actually were tested for coronavirus, and it was an outdoor event, which all of our scientists regularly and routinely advise. The difference here is President Trump and I trust the American people to make choices in the best interest of their health. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris consistently talk about mandates, and not just mandates with the coronavirus, but a government takeover of health care, the Green New Deal, all government control. We're about freedom and respecting the freedom of the American people.
Let's talk about respecting the American people. You respect the American people when you tell them the truth. You respect the American people when you have the courage to be a leader, speaking of those things that you may not want people to hear, but they need to hear so they can protect themselves. But this administration stood on information that if you had as a parent, if you had as a worker, knowing you didn't have enough money saved up, and now you're standing in a food line because of the ineptitude of an administration that was unwilling to speak the truth to the American people. So let's talk about caring about the American people. The American people have had to sacrifice far too much because of the incompetence of this administration. It is asking too much of the people.
Susan, we talked about
it is asking too much of the people. That they would not be equipped with the information they need to help themselves to protect their parents and their children.
Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, I'm sorry.
It's fine, I'm Kamala.
No, you're Senator Harris to me. For life to get back to normal, Dr. Anthony Fauci and other experts say that most of the people who can be vaccinated need to be vaccinated. But half of Americans now say they wouldn't take a vaccine if it was released now. If the Trump administration approves a vaccine before or after the election, should Americans take it, and would you take it?
If the public health professionals, if Dr. Fauci, if the doctors tell us that we should take it, I'll be the first in line to take it, absolutely. But if Donald Trump tells us that we should take it, I'm not taking it.
Vice President Pence, there have been a lot of repercussions from this pandemic. In recent days, the president's diagnosis of COVID-19 has underscored the importance of the job that you hold and that you are seeking. That's our second topic tonight. It's the role of the vice president. One of you will make history on January 20th. You will be the vice president to the oldest president the United States has ever had. Donald Trump will be 74 years old on Inauguration Day. Joe Biden will be 78 years old. That already has raised concerns among some voters, concerns that have been sharpened by President Trump's hospitalization in recent days. Vice President Pence, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with President Trump about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes without interruption.
Well, Susan, thank you, although I would like to go back.
I think we need to move on to the issue of
Well, thank you, but I would like to go back because the reality is that we're going to have a vaccine, Senator, in record time. in unheard of time, in less than a year. We have 5 companies in phase 3 clinical trials, and we're right now producing tens of millions of doses. So the fact that you continue to undermine public confidence in a vaccine, if the vaccine emerges during the Trump administration, I think is unconscionable. And Senator, I just ask you, stop playing politics with people's lives. The reality is that we will have a vaccine, we believe, before the end of this year. And it will have the capacity to save countless American lives. And your continuous undermining of confidence in a vaccine is it's just unacceptable. And let me also say, you know, the reality is when you talk about failure in this administration, we actually do know what failure looks like in a pandemic. It was 2009. The swine flu arrived in the United States. Thankfully, it ended up not being as lethal as the coronavirus. But before the end of the year, when Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, not 7.5 million people contracted the swine flu. 60 million Americans contracted the swine flu. If the swine flu had been as lethal as the coronavirus, in 2009, when Joe Biden was vice president, we would have lost 2 million American lives. His own chief of staff, Ron Klain, would say last year that it was pure luck that they did, quote, everything possible wrong. And we learned from that. They left the strategic national stockpile empty. They left an empty and hollow plan, but we still learned from it. And I think the American people, I'm going to say again, can be proud of what we have done. And Senator, please stop undermining confidence in a vaccine.
Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked Vice President Pence, which is, have you had a conversation or reached an agreement with Vice President Biden about safeguards or procedures when it comes to the issue of presidential disability? And if not, and if you win the election next month, do you think you should? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
So let me tell you, first of all, the day I got the call from Joe Biden, it was actually a Zoom call, asking me to serve with him on this ticket was probably one of the most memorable days of my life. I thought about my mother, who came to the United States at the age of 19, gave birth to me at the age of 25 at Kaiser Hospital in Oakland, California. And the thought that I'd be sitting here right now, I know would make her proud, and she must be looking down on this. You know, Joe and I were raised in a very similar way. We were raised with values that are about hard work, about the value and the dignity of public service, and about the importance of fighting for the dignity of all people. And I think Joe asked me to serve with him because, you know, I have a career that included being elected the first woman district attorney of San Francisco, where I created models of innovation for law enforcement in terms of reform of the criminal justice system. I was elected the first woman of color and black woman to be elected Attorney General of the state of California, where I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, second only to the United States Department of Justice. And there I took on everything from transnational criminal organizations to the big banks that were taking advantage of homeowners to for-profit colleges that were taking advantage of veterans. And then, of course, now I serve in the United States Senate as only the second black woman ever elected to the United States Senate. I serve on the Senate Intelligence Committee, where I've been in regular receipt of classified information about threats to our nation and hotspots around the world. I've traveled the world. I've met with our soldiers in war zones. And I think Joe has asked me to serve with him because he knows that we share a purpose which is about lifting up the American people. And after the 4 years that we have seen of Donald Trump unifying our country around our common values and principles.
Thank you, Senator Harris. You know, neither President Trump nor Vice President Biden has released the sort of detailed health information that had become the modern norm until the 2016 election. And in recent days, President Trump's doctors have given misleading answers or refused to answer basic questions about his health. And my question to each of you in turn is this information voters deserve to know? Vice President Pence, would you like to go first?
Well, Susan, thank you. And let me say, on behalf of the president, and the First Lady how moved we've all been by the outpouring of prayers and concern for the President. And I do believe it's emblematic of the prayers and the concern that have ushered forth for every American impacted by the coronavirus. But the care the President received at Walter Reed Hospital, the White House doctors, was exceptional. And the transparency that they practiced all along the way will continue. The American people have a right to know about the health and well-being of their president, and will continue to do that. But I'm just extremely grateful and was more than a little moved by the broad and bipartisan support. And Senator, I want to thank you and Joe Biden for your expressions of genuine concern. And I also want to congratulate you, as I did on that phone call, on the historic nature of your nomination.
Thank you.
I never expected to be on this stage 4 years ago, so I know the feeling. But the reality is we've got an election before the American people in the midst of this challenging year. And the stakes have never been higher, but I think the choice has never been clearer.
I want to give Senator Harris a chance to respond to the same question I asked, which is, do voters have a right to know more detailed health information about presidential candidates and especially about presidents, especially when they're facing some kind of challenge?
Absolutely, and that's why Joe Biden has been so incredibly transparent, and certainly by contrast, the president has not, both in terms of health records, but also let's look at taxes. We now know, because of great investigative journalism, that Donald Trump paid $750 in taxes. When I first heard about it, I literally said, "You mean $750,000? And it was like, no, $750. We now know Donald Trump owes and is in debt for $400 million. And just so everyone is clear, when we say in debt, it means you owe money to somebody. And it'd be really good to know who the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, owes money to, because the American people have a right to know what is influencing the President's decisions. And is he making those decisions on the best interest of the American people, of you, or self-interest? So, Susan, I'm glad you asked about transparency, because it has to be across the board. Joe has been incredibly transparent over many, many years. The one thing we all know about Joe, he puts it all out there. He is honest, he is forthright. But Donald Trump, on the other hand, has been about covering up everything.
Thank you, Senator Harris. I want to give you a chance to respond, Vice President.
Well, look, I respect the fact that Joe Biden spent 47 years in public life. I respect your public service as well.
Thank you.
But the American people have a president who's a businessman, he's a job creator, who's paid tens of millions of dollars in taxes, payroll taxes, property taxes. He's created tens of thousands of American jobs. And the president said those public reports are not accurate. And the president's also released literally stacks of financial disclosures the American people can review just as the law allows. But the distinction here is that Joe Biden, 47 years in public service, compared to President Donald Trump, who brought all of that experience 4 years ago.
Thank you, Vice
and
President.
turned this economy around by cutting taxes, rolling back regulation, unleashing American energy, fighting for free and fair trade, and all of that's on the line if Joe Biden and Kamala Harris.
You know, that's a good segue into our third topic, which is about the economy. This has been another aspect of life for Americans that's been so affected by this coronavirus. We have a jobs crisis brewing. On Friday, we learned that the unemployment rate had declined to 7.9% in September, but the job growth had stalled, and that was before the latest round of layoffs and furloughs in the airline industry at Disney and elsewhere. Hundreds of thousands of discouraged workers have stopped looking for work. Nearly 11 million jobs that existed at the beginning of the year haven't been replaced. Those hardest hit include Latinos, Blacks, and women. Senator Harris, the Biden-Harris campaign has proposed new programs to boost the economy, and you would pay for that new spending by raising $4 trillion in taxes on wealthy individuals and corporations. Some economists warn that could curb entrepreneurial ventures that fuel growth and create jobs. Would raising taxes put the recovery at risk? And you have 2 minutes to answer uninterrupted.
Thank you. On the issue of the economy, I think there couldn't be a more fundamental difference between Donald Trump and Joe Biden. Joe Biden believes you measure the health and the strength of America's economy based on the health and the strength of the American worker and the American family. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who measures the strength of the economy based on how rich people are doing, which is why he passed a tax bill benefiting the top 1% and the biggest corporations of America, leading to a $2 trillion deficit that the American people are going to have to pay for. On day one, Joe Biden will repeal that tax bill. He'll get rid of it. And what he'll do with the money is invest it in the American people. And through a plan that is about investing in infrastructure, something that Donald Trump said he would do. I remember hearing about some infrastructure week. I don't think it ever happened. But Joe Biden will do that. He'll invest in infrastructure. It's about upgrading our roads and bridges, but also investing in clean energy and renewable energy. Joe is going to invest that money in what we need to do around innovation. There was a time when our country believed in science and invested in research and development so that we were an innovation leader on the globe. Joe Biden will use that money to invest in education. So, for example, for folks who want to go to a 2-year community college, it will be free. If you come from a family that makes less than $125,000, you'll go to a public university for free. And across the board, we'll make sure that if you have student loan debt, it's cut by $10,000. That's how Joe Biden thinks about the economy, which is it's about investing in the people of our country as opposed to passing a tax bill, which had the benefit of letting American corporations go offshore to do their business.
Thank you,
You're
Senator
welcome.
Harris. Vice President Pence, your administration has been predicting a rapid and robust recovery, but the latest economic report suggests that's not happening. Should Americans be braced for an economic comeback that is going to take not months, but a year or more? You have 2 minutes to answer, uninterrupted.
When President Trump and I took office, America had gone through the slowest economic recovery since the Great Depression. It was when Joe Biden was vice president, they tried to tax and spend and regulate and bail our way back to a growing economy. President Trump cut taxes across the board. Despite what Senator Harris says, the average American family of 4 had $2,000 in savings in taxes. And with the rise in wages that occurred, most predominantly for blue-collar, hardworking Americans, the average household income for a family of 4 increased by $4,000 following President Trump's tax cuts. But America, you just heard Senator Harris tell you, on day one, Joe Biden's going to raise your taxes. It's really remarkable to think, Susan. I mean, right after a time where we're going through a pandemic that lost 22 million jobs at the height, we've already added back 11.6 million jobs because we had a president who cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, fought for free and fair trade, and secured $4 trillion from the Congress of the United States to give direct payments to families, saved 50 million jobs through the Paycheck Protection Program. We literally have spared no expense to help the American people and the American worker through this. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris want to raise taxes. They want to bury our economy under a $2 trillion Green New Deal, which you were one of the original co-sponsors of in the United States Senate. They want to abolish fossil fuels and ban fracking, which would cost hundreds of thousands of American jobs all across the heartland. And Joe Biden wants to go back to the economic surrender to China, that when we took office, half of our international trade deficit was with China alone. And Joe Biden wants to repeal all of the tariffs that President Trump put into effect to fight for American jobs and American workers. Joe Biden says democracy's on the ballot. Make no mistake about it, Susan. The American economy, the American comeback is on the ballot with 4 more years of growth and opportunity, 4 more years of President Donald Trump. 2021 is going to be the biggest economic year in the history of this country.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Senator Harris.
Well, I mean, I thought we saw enough of it in last week's debate, but I think this is supposed to be a debate based on fact and truth. And the truth and the fact is Joe Biden has been very clear. He will not raise taxes on anybody who makes less than $400,000 a year.
He said he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts.
Mr. Vice President, I'm speaking.
Well,
I'm speaking.
It'd be important if you said the truth. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that he's going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. That was tax cuts that gave the average working family $2,000 in a tax break every single year.
Senator, that is
that's the math.
absolutely not true. That
Is he only going to repeal part of the Trump tax cuts?
If you don't mind letting me finish, we can then have a conversation, okay?
Please.
Okay. Joe Biden will not raise taxes on anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden will not end fracking. He has been very clear about that. Joe Biden is the one who, during the Great Recession, was responsible for the Recovery Act that brought America back. And now the Trump-Pence administration wants to take credit when they rode the coattails of Joe Biden's success for the economy that they had at the beginning of their term. Of course, now the economy is a complete disaster. But Joe Biden, on the one hand, did that. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who has reigned over a recession that is being compared to the Great Depression. On the one hand, you have Joe Biden, who was responsible with President Barack Obama for the Affordable Care Act, which brought health care to over 20 million Americans and protected people with pre-existing conditions. And what it also did is it saved those families who otherwise were going bankrupt because of hospital bills they could not afford. On the other hand, you have Donald Trump, who's in court right now, trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act, which means that you will lose protections if you have pre-existing conditions. And this is very important, Susan.
Yes,
and it's
but
important.
we need to give Vice President.
I'd just like to, he interrupted me, and I'd like to just finish, please. If you have a pre-existing condition, heart disease, diabetes, breast cancer, they're coming for you. If you love someone who has a pre-existing condition, they're coming for you. If you are under the age of 26 on your parents' coverage, they're coming for you.
Senator Harris, thank you.
You're welcome.
Let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, I hope we have a chance to talk about health care, because Obamacare was a disaster. The American people remember it well. And President Trump and I have a plan to improve health care and protect pre-existing conditions for every American. But look, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your own opinion, but you're not entitled to your own facts. You yourself said on multiple occasions when you were running for president that you would ban fracking. Joe Biden looked at a supporter in the eye and pointed and said, I guarantee that we will abolish fossil fuels. They have a $2 trillion version of the Green New Deal, Susan, that your newspaper, USA Today, said really wasn't that very different from the original Green New Deal. More taxes, more regulation, banning fracking, abolishing fossil fuel, crushing American energy, and economic surrender to China is a prescription for economic decline. President Trump and I will keep America growing. The V-shaped recovery that's underway right now will continue with 4 more years of President Donald Trump in the White House.
Thank you very, very much, Vice President Pence. Once again, you've provided the perfect segue to a new topic, which is climate change. And Vice President Pence, I'd like to pose the first question to you. This year, we've seen record-setting hurricanes in the South. Another one, Hurricane Delta, is now threatening the Gulf. And we have seen record-setting wildfires in the West. Do you believe, as the scientific community has concluded, that man-made climate change has made wildfires bigger, hotter, and more deadly, and have made hurricanes wetter, slower, and more damaging? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. Well, first, I'm very proud of our record on the environment and on conservation. According to all of the best estimates, our air and land are cleaner than any time ever recorded, and our water is among the cleanest in the world. And just a little while ago, the president signed the Outdoors Act. It's the largest investment in our public lands and public parks in 100 years. So President Trump has made a commitment to conservation and to the environment. Now, with regard to climate change, the climate is changing. But the issue is, what's the cause and what do we do about it? President Trump has made it clear that we're going to continue to listen to the science. Now, Joe Biden and Kamala Harris would put us back in the Paris Climate Accord. They'd impose the Green New Deal, which would crush American energy, would increase the energy costs of American families in their homes, and literally would crush American jobs. And President Trump and I believe that the progress that we have made in a cleaner environment has been happening precisely because we have a strong free market economy. You know, what's remarkable is the United States has reduced CO2 more than the countries that are still in the Paris Climate Accord, but we've done it through innovation. And we've done it through natural gas and fracking, which, Senator, the American people can go look at the record. I know Joe Biden says otherwise now, as you do, but the both of you repeatedly committed to abolishing fossil fuel and banning fracking. And so by creating the kind of American innovation, we're actually steering toward a stronger and better environment. With regard to wildfires, President Trump and I believe that forest management has to be front and center, and even Governor Gavin Newsom from your state has agreed we've got to work on forest management. And with regard to hurricanes, the National Oceanic Administration tells us that actually as difficult as they are,
Thank you, Vice President.
there are no more hurricanes today than there were 100 years ago.
Thank you.
But many of the climate alarmists
Pence,
use
I'm sorry, your time
hurricanes
is up.
and wildfires to try and
Thank
sell
you,
their
Vice
bill of
President
goods of a
Pence.
Green New Deal. And President Trump and I are going to always put
Thank you,
American
Vice
jobs and
President
American
Pence.
workers first.
Senator Harris, as the Vice President mentioned, you co-sponsored the Green New Deal in Congress. But Vice President Biden said in last week's debate that he does not support the Green New Deal. But if you look at the Biden-Harris campaign website, it describes the Green New Deal as a crucial framework. What exactly would be the stance of a Biden-Harris administration toward the Green New Deal? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Sure. So first of all, I will repeat, and the American people know, that Joe Biden will not ban fracking. That is a fact. That is a fact. I will repeat that Joe Biden has been very clear that he thinks about growing jobs, which is why he will not increase taxes for anyone who makes less than $400,000 a year. Joe Biden's economic plan, Moody's, which is a reputable Wall Street firm, has said will create 7 million more jobs than Donald Trump's. And part of those jobs that will be created by Joe Biden are going to be about clean energy and renewable energy. Because you see, Joe understands that the west coast of our country is burning, including my home state of California. Joe sees what is happening on the Gulf states, which are being battered by storms. Joe has seen and talked with the farmers in Iowa, whose entire crops have been destroyed because of floods. And so Joe believes, again, in science. I'll tell you something, Susan. I served, when I first got to the Senate, on the committee that's responsible for the environment. Do you know this administration took the word science off the website and then took the phrase climate change off the website? We have seen a pattern with this administration, which is they don't believe in science. And Joe's plan is about saying we're going to deal with it, but we're also going to create jobs. Donald Trump, when asked about the wildfires in California, and the question was, you know, the science is telling us this, you know what Donald Trump said? Science doesn't know. So let's talk about who is prepared to lead our country over the course of the next 4 years on what is an existential threat to us as human beings. Joe is about saying we're going to invest that in renewable energy. It's going to be about the creation of millions of jobs. We will achieve net zero emissions by 2050, carbon neutral by 2035. Joe has a plan. This has been a lot of talk from the Trump administration, and really it has been to go backward instead of forward. We will also re-enter the climate agreement with pride.
Senator Harris just said that climate change is an existential threat. Vice President Pence, do you believe that climate change poses an existential threat?
As I said, Susan, the climate is changing. We'll follow the science. But once again, Senator Harris is denying the fact that they're going to raise taxes on every American. Joe Biden said twice in the debate last week that on day one he was going to repeal the Trump tax cuts. Those tax cuts delivered $2,000 in tax relief to the average family of four across America. And with regard to banning fracking, I just recommend that people look at the record. You yourself said repeatedly that you would ban fracking. You were the first Senate co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. And while Joe Biden denied the Green New Deal, Susan, thank you for pointing out, the Green New Deal is on their campaign website. And as USA Today said, it's essentially the same plan as you co-sponsored with AOC when she submitted it in the Senate. And you just heard the senator say that she's going to resubmit America to the Paris Climate Accord. Look, the American people have always cherished our environment. We'll continue to cherish it. We've made great progress reducing CO2 emissions through American innovation and the development of natural gas through fracking. We don't need a massive $2 trillion Green New Deal that would impose all new mandates on American businesses and American families.
Thank you.
Joe Biden wants us to retrofit 4 million American business buildings. It makes no sense. It will cost jobs. President Trump is going to put America first. He's going to put jobs first, and we're going to take care of our environment and follow the science.
Thank you,
Vice President. On the issue of jobs,
Senator Harris.
Let's talk about that. The Vice President earlier referred to, as part of what he thinks is an accomplishment, the President's trade war with China. You lost that trade war. You lost it. What ended up happening is because of a so-called trade war with China, America lost 300,000 manufacturing jobs. Farmers have experienced bankruptcy because of it. We are in a manufacturing recession because of it. And when we look at where this administration has been, there are estimates that by the end of the term of this administration, they will have lost more jobs than almost any other presidential administration. And the American people know what I'm talking about. You know, I think about 20-year-olds. You know, we have a 20-year-old, a 20-something-year-old, who are coming out of high school and college right now, and you're wondering, is there going to be a job there for me? We're looking at people who are trying to figure out how they're going to pay rent by the end of the month. Almost half of American renters are worried about whether they're going to be able to pay rent by the end of the month. This is where the economy is in America right now, and it is because of the catastrophe and the failure of leadership of this administration.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you just 15 seconds to respond, because then I want to move on to
Well, I'd love to respond. Look, lost the trade war with China. Joe Biden never fought it. Joe Biden has been a cheerleader for communist China over the last several decades. And again, Senator Harris, you're entitled to your opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. When Joe Biden was vice president, we lost 200,000 manufacturing jobs, and President Obama said they were never coming back. He said we needed a magic wand to bring them back. In our first 3 years after we cut taxes, rolled back regulation, unleashed American energy, this administration saw 500,000 manufacturing jobs created. And that's exactly the kind of growth we're going to continue to see as we bring our nation through this pandemic. But a Green New Deal, your massive new mandates, your Paris Climate Accord, it's going to kill jobs this time, just like it killed jobs.
I just need to respond very briefly.
15 seconds, and then we'll move on.
Thank you. Joe Biden is responsible for saving America's auto industry, and you voted against it. So let's set the record straight. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'd like to talk about China. We have, as our next topic, we have no more complicated or consequential foreign relationship than the one with China. It is a huge market for American agricultural goods. It's a potential partner in dealing with climate change in North Korea. And in a video tonight, President Trump again blamed it for the coronavirus, saying China will pay. Vice President Pence, how would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Competitors, adversaries, enemies? You have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Susan. Well, before I leave that, let me speak to voting records if I can. You know, everybody knows that NAFTA cost literally thousands of American factories to close. We saw automotive jobs go south of the border. President Trump fought to renegotiate NAFTA. And the United States-Mexico-Canada agreement is now the law of the land. American people deserve to know Senator Kamala Harris was one of only 10 members of the Senate to vote against the USMCA. It was a huge win for American auto workers. It was a huge win for American farmers, especially dairy in the upper Midwest. But Senator, you said it didn't go far enough on climate change, that you put your radical environmental agenda ahead of American auto workers and ahead of American jobs. The American people deserve to know that. It's probably why Newsweek magazine said that Kamala Harris was the most liberal member of the United States Senate in 2019, more liberal than Bernie Sanders, more liberal than any of the others in the United States Senate. So Now, with regard to China, look, Susan, first and foremost, China is to blame for the coronavirus. And President Trump is not happy about it. He's made that very clear, made it clear again today. China and the World Health Organization did not play straight with the American people. They did not let our personnel into China to get information on the coronavirus until the middle of February. Fortunately, President Trump, in dealing with China from the outset of this administration, standing up to China that had been taking advantage of America for decades in the wake of Joe Biden's cheerleading for China, President Trump made that decision before the end of January to suspend all travel from China. And again, the American people deserve to know Joe Biden opposed President Trump's decision to suspend all travel from China. He said it was hysterical. He said it was
Thank you, Vice
xenophobic.
President Pence.
But President Trump has
Vice President
stood
Pence,
up
your
to
time is
China.
up.
We're going to continue to stand strong.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
We want to improve the relationship, but we're going to level the playing field, and we're going to hold
Vice President
China
Pence.
accountable for what they did to America with the coronavirus.
Thank you. Senator Harris, let me ask you the same question that I asked the Vice President. How would you describe our fundamental relationship with China? Are we competitors, adversaries, enemies? You'll have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Susan, the Trump administration's perspective and approach to China has resulted in the loss of American lives, American jobs, and America's standing. There's a weird obsession that President Trump has had with getting rid of whatever accomplishment was achieved by President Obama and Vice President Biden. For example, they created within the White House an office that basically was responsible for monitoring pandemics. They got rid of it.
Not true.
There was a team of disease experts that President Obama and Vice President Biden dispatched to China to monitor what is now predictable and what might happen. They pulled them out. We now are looking at 210,000 Americans who have lost their lives. Let's look at the job situation. We mentioned before the trade deal, the trade war, they wanted to call it, with China. It resulted in the loss of over 300 manufacturing jobs and a manufacturing recession, and the American consumer paying thousands of dollars more for goods because of that failed war that they called it. Then let's talk about standing. Pew, a reputable research firm, has done an analysis that shows that leaders of all of our formerly allied countries have now decided that they hold in greater esteem and respect Xi Jinping, the head of the Chinese Communist Party, than they do Donald Trump, the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States. This is where we are today because of a failure of leadership by this administration.
Senator Harris, we've seen changes in the role of the United States in terms of global leadership over the past 4 years. And of course, times do change. What's your definition? We've seen strains with China, of course, as the Vice President mentioned. We've seen strains with our traditional allies in NATO and elsewhere. What is your definition of the role of American leadership in 2020?
So, you know, Joe is, I love talking with Joe about a lot of these issues. And, you know, Joe, I think he said it quite well. He says, you know, foreign policy, it might sound complicated, but really it's relationships. So just think about it as relationships. And so we know this in our personal and professional relationships. You got to keep your word to your friends. You got to be loyal to your friends. People who've stood with you, you got to stand with them. You got to know who your adversaries are and keep them in check. But what we have seen with Donald Trump is that he has betrayed our friends and embraced dictators around the world. Let's take, for example, Russia. So, Russia, I serve on the Intelligence Committee of the United States Senate. America's intelligence community told us Russia interfered in the election of the President of the United States in 2016 and is playing in 2020. Christopher Wray, the director of the FBI, said the same. But Donald Trump, the Commander-in-Chief of the United States of America, prefers to take the word of Vladimir Putin over the word of the American intelligence community. You look at our friends at NATO. He's walked away from agreements. You can look at the Iran nuclear deal, which now has put us in a position where we are less safe because they are building up what might end up being a significant nuclear arsenal. We were in that deal, guys. We were in the Iran nuclear deal with friends, with allies around the country. And because of Donald Trump's unilateral approach to foreign policy, coupled with his isolationism, he pulled us out and has made America less safe. So, Susan, it's about relationships. And the thing that has always been part of the strength of our nation, in addition to our great military, has been that we keep our word. But Donald Trump doesn't understand that because he doesn't understand what it means to be honest.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me give you a chance to respond.
Well, thank you. Well, President Trump kept his word when we moved the American embassy to Jerusalem, the capital of the state of Israel. When Joe Biden was vice president, they promised to do that, and they never did. We've stood strong with our allies, but we've been demanding. NATO is now contributing more to our common defense than ever before, thanks to President Trump's leadership. We've strengthened our alliances across the Asia-Pacific, and we've stood strong against those who would do us harm. You know, when President Trump came into office, ISIS had captured an area of the Middle East the size of Pennsylvania. But President Trump unleashed the American military, and our armed forces destroyed the ISIS caliphate and took down their leader, al-Baghdadi, without one American casualty. Al-Baghdadi was responsible for the death of thousands. But notably, America's hearts today are with the family of Kayla Mueller, her parents of which are here with us tonight in Salt Lake City. Today, 2 of the ISIS killers responsible for Kayla Mueller's murder were brought to justice in the United States. Jihadi John was killed on the battlefield along with the other Beetle. The reality is that when Joe Biden was vice president, we had an opportunity to save Kayla Mueller. It breaks my heart to reflect on it, but the military came into the Oval Office, presented a plan. They said they knew where Kayla was. Baghdadi had held her for 18 months, abused her mercilessly before they killed her. But when Joe Biden was vice president, they hesitated for a month. And when armed forces finally went in, it was clear she'd been moved 2 days earlier. And her family says with a heart that broke the heart of every American that if President Donald Trump had been president, they believe Kayla would be alive today.
Thank you, Vice
Look,
President.
we destroyed the ISIS caliphate. And you talk about re-entering the Iran nuclear deal. I mean, the last administration transferred $1.8 billion to the leading state sponsor
Thank you, Vice
of
President
terrorism.
Pence.
President Donald Trump got us out of the deal.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
And when Qasem Soleimani was traveling to Baghdad
Thank you,
to do
Vice President
harm
Pence.
to Americans, President Donald Trump took
Thank you,
him
Vice
out.
President Pence.
And America is safer, our allies are safer, and the American people know President Donald Trump will never
Thank you, Vice President
take
Pence.
action.
I would like to give Senator Harris a chance to respond, but not at such great length because, of course, there are other topics we want to talk about.
But I would like equal time.
Yes.
Thank you.
Please go ahead.
First of all, to the Mueller family, I know about your daughter's case, and I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. What happened to her is awful, and it should have never happened. And I know Joe feels the same way. And I know that President Obama feels the same way. But you mentioned Soleimani. Let's start there. So after the strike on Soleimani, there was a counter strike on our troops in Iraq. And they suffered serious brain injuries. And do you know what Donald Trump dismissed them as? Headaches. And this is about a pattern of Donald Trump's, where he has referred to our men who are serving in our military as suckers and losers. Donald Trump, who went to Arlington Cemetery and stood above the graves of our fallen heroes and said, what's in it for them? Because, of course, you know, he only thinks about what's in it for him. Let's take what he said about John McCain, a great American hero. And Donald Trump says he doesn't deserve to be called a hero because he was a prisoner of war. And this is very important when you want to talk about who is the current commander-in-chief and what they care about and what they don't care about. Public reporting that Russia had bounties on the heads of American soldiers. And you know what a bounty is? It's somebody puts a price on your head and they will pay it if you are killed. And Donald Trump had talked at least 6 times to Vladimir Putin and never brought up the subject. Joe Biden would never do that.
Thank you.
Joe Biden would, but Joe Biden would hold Russia to account for any threat to our nation's security or to our troops who are sacrificing their lives for the sake of our democracy and our safety.
Thank you, Senator Harris. This is such an important issue, but we have other important issues as well. And
Susan,
I want to make sure we have a chance
I really have to
talk
respond
about
to that. Look, she has
15 seconds because
Well, I got to have
trying
more
to
than
keep,
that. Look,
well, I'm sorry, but Vice President
Look,
Pence, you've had more time than she's had so far.
The slanders against President Donald Trump regarding men and women of our armed forces are absurd.
I'm sorry, Vice President
My son
Pence.
is a captain in the United
Yes.
States Marine Corps. My son-in-law is deployed in the United States Navy. I can assure all of you, with sons and daughters serving in our military, President Donald Trump not only respects but reveres all of those who serve in our armed forces, and any suggestion otherwise is ridiculous.
Thank you, Vice President Pence. Vice
The American
President
people
Pence,
deserve, Susan,
Vice
the
President
American
Pence,
people
I
deserve to
didn't,
know.
Vice President Pence, I did not, excuse me,
Susan, the
I did
American
not
people
create
deserve
the
to know
rules for tonight.
Joe Biden
Your
and
campaigns agreed to the rules for tonight's debate with the Commission on Presidential Debates. I'm here to enforce them, which involves moving from one topic to another, giving roughly equal time to both of you, which is what I'm trying very hard to do.
Go right ahead.
So I want to go ahead and move to the next topic, which is an important one, as the last topic was, and that is the Supreme Court. On Monday, the Senate Judiciary Committee is scheduled to open hearings on Amy Coney Barrett's nomination to the Supreme Court. Senator Harris, you'll be there as a member of the committee. Yes. Her confirmation would cement the court's conservative majority and make it likely open to more abortion restrictions, even to overturning the landmark Roe v. Wade ruling. Access to abortion would then be up to the states. Vice President Pence, you're the former governor of Indiana. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want Indiana to do? Would you want your home state to ban all abortions? You have 2 minutes, uninterrupted.
Well, thank you for the question, but I'll use a little bit of my time to respond to that very important issue before. The American people deserve to know Qasem Soleimani, the Iranian general, was responsible for the death of hundreds of American service members. When the opportunity came, we saw him headed to Baghdad to kill more Americans. President Trump didn't hesitate, and Qasem Soleimani is gone. But you deserve to know that Joe Biden and Kamala Harris actually criticized the decision to take out Qasem Soleimani. It's really inexplicable, but with regard to Joe Biden, it's explainable. Because history records that Joe Biden actually opposed the raid against Osama bin Laden. It's absolutely essential that we have a commander-in-chief who will not hesitate to act to protect American lives and to protect American service members, and that's what you have in President Donald Trump. Now, with regard to the Supreme Court of the United States, let me say President Trump and I could not be more enthusiastic about the opportunity to see Judge Amy Coney Barrett become Justice Amy Coney Barrett. Now, she's a brilliant woman, and she will bring a lifetime of experience and a sizable American family to the Supreme Court of the United States. And our hope is, in the hearing next week, unlike Justice Kavanaugh received with treatment from you and others, we hope she gets a fair hearing. And we particularly hope that we don't see the kind of attacks on her Christian faith that we saw before. I mean, the Democrat chairman of the Judiciary Committee before, when Judge Barrett was being confirmed for the Court of Appeals, expressed concern that the dogma of her faith lived loudly in her. Dick Durbin of Illinois said that it was a concern. Senator, I know one of our judicial nominees, you actually attacked because they were a member of the Catholic Knights of Columbus, just because the Knights of Columbus holds pro-life views and
Thank you.
pro-marriage views.
Thank you, Vice President
So
Pence. Your
my
time
hope
is
is
up.
that when the hearing takes place,
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
that Judge Amy Coney Barrett will be respected,
Thank you,
treated
Vice President
respectfully,
Pence.
voted and confirmed
Thank
to the
you.
Supreme Court of the United States.
Senator Harris, you're the senator from and former Attorney General of California. So let me ask you a parallel question to the one I posed to the Vice President. If Roe v. Wade is overturned, what would you want California to do? Would you want your home state to enact no restrictions on access to abortion? And you have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Thank you, Susan. First of all, Joe Biden and I are both people of faith, and it's insulting to suggest that we would knock anyone for their faith. And in fact, Joe, if elected, will be only the second practicing Catholic as President of the United States. On the issue of this nomination, Joe and I are very clear, as are the majority of the American people. We are 27 days before the decision about who will be the next president of the United States. And, you know, before, when this conversation has come up, you know, it's been about election year or election time. We're literally in an election. Over 4 million people have voted. People are in the process of voting right now. And so Joe has been very clear, as the American people are. Let the American people fill that seat in the White House, and then we'll fill that seat on the United States Supreme Court. And to your point, Susan, the issues before us couldn't be more serious. There's the issue of choice, and I will always fight for a woman's right to make a decision about her own body. It should be her decision and not that of Donald Trump and the Vice President, Michael Pence. But let's also look at what else is before the court. It's the Affordable Care Act. Like, literally in the midst of a public health pandemic, when over 210,000 people have died and 7 million people probably have what will be in the future considered a pre-existing condition because you contracted the virus. Donald Trump is in court right now trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. And I said it before, and it bears repeating. This means that there will be no more protections if they win for people with pre-existing conditions. No. This means that over 20 million people will lose your coverage. It means that if you're under the age of 26, you can't stay on your parents' coverage anymore. And here's the thing. The contrast couldn't be more clear. They're trying to get rid of the Affordable Care Act. Joe Biden is saying, let's expand coverage. Let's give you a choice of a public option or private coverage. Let's bring down premiums.
Thank you, Senator
Let's
Harris.
lower Medicare eligibility to 60.
Thank you, Senator.
That's true
Harris.
leadership.
You know, you mentioned earlier, Vice President Pence, that the president was committed to maintaining protections for people with pre-existing conditions. But you do have this court case that you are supporting, your administration supporting, that would strike down the Affordable Care Act. The president says, President Trump says that he's going to protect people with pre-existing conditions, but he has not explained how he would do that. And that was one of the toughest nuts to crack when they were passing the Affordable Care Act. So tell us specifically, how would your administration protect Americans with pre-existing conditions to have access to affordable insurance if the Affordable Care Act is struck down?
Well, thank you, Susan. But let me just say, addressing your very first question, I couldn't be more proud to serve as vice president to a president who stands without apology for the sanctity of human life. I'm pro-life. I don't apologize for it. And this is another one of those cases where there's such a dramatic contrast. Joe Biden and Kamala Harris support taxpayer funding of abortion all the way up to the moment of birth. Late-term abortion. They want to increase funding to Planned Parenthood of America. Now, for our part, I would never presume how Judge Amy Coney Barrett would rule on the Supreme Court of the United States, but we'll continue to stand strong for the right to life. When you speak about the Supreme Court, though, I think the American people really deserve an answer, Senator Harris. Are you and Joe Biden going to pack the court if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed? I mean, there have been 29 vacancies on the Supreme Court during presidential election years, from George Washington to Barack Obama. Presidents have nominated in all 29 cases. But your party is actually openly advocating adding seats to the Supreme Court, which has had 9 seats for 150 years, if you don't get your way. This is a classic case of if you can't win by the rules, You're going to change the rules. Now, you've refused to answer the question. Joe Biden has refused to answer the question. So I think the American people would really like to know, if Judge Amy Coney Barrett is confirmed to the Supreme Court of the United States, are you and Joe Biden, if somehow you win this election, going to pack the Supreme Court to get your way?
I'm so glad we went through a little history lesson. Let's do that a little more. In 1864...
Well, I'd like you to answer the question.
Mr.
Yes,
Vice President, I'm
please,
speaking.
very
I'm
fast.
speaking. Okay. In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume if you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States, and then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Thank you,
And the
Senator
American
Harris.
people, Susan, are voting right now. They'd like to know if you and Joe Biden are going to pack the Supreme Court if you don't get your way in this nomination.
Let's talk about packing.
You once
Come
again
on.
gave a non-answer. Joe Biden gave a non-answer.
Trying to answer you
The
now.
American people deserve a straight answer. And if you haven't figured it out yet, the straight answer is they are going to pack the Supreme Court if they somehow win this election. Men and
Mr.
women,
Vice President,
I got to
I
tell you,
think
people across this country, if you cherish our Supreme Court, if you cherish the separation of powers, you need to reject the Biden-Harris ticket. Come November the 3rd, re-elect President Donald Trump, and we'll stand by that separation of powers in a 9-seat Supreme Court.
Yeah, let's talk about packing the court then. Let's talk about the
Please.
fact. Yeah, I'm about to. So the Trump-Pence administration has been, because I sit on the Senate Judiciary Committee, Susan, as you mentioned, and I've witnessed the appointments for lifetime appointments to the federal courts, district courts, courts of appeal. People who are purely ideological, people who have been reviewed by legal professional organizations and found to have been not competent, are substandard. And do you know that of the 50 people who President Trump appointed to the Court of Appeals for lifetime appointments, not one is black? This is what they've been doing. You want to talk about packing a court? Let's have that discussion.
All right, thank you, Senator. Let's go on and talk about the issue of racial justice.
I just want the record to reflect she never answered the question. So the American people,
Thank
maybe
you.
the next debate, Joe Biden will answer the question,
you,
but I think
thank
the
you.
American people know the answer.
Thank you, Vice President. In March, Breonna Taylor, a 26-year-old emergency room technician in Louisville, was shot and killed after police officers executing a search warrant in a narcotics investigation broke into her apartment. The police said they identified themselves. Taylor's boyfriend said he didn't hear them do that. He used a gun registered to him to fire a shot, which wounded an officer. The officers then fired more than 20 rounds into the apartment. They say they were acting in self-defense. None of them have been indicted in connection with her death. Senator Harris, in the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes.
I don't believe so. And I've talked with Breonna's mother, Tamika Palmer, and her family. And her family deserves justice. She was a beautiful young woman. She had as her life goal to become a nurse, and she wanted to become an EMT to first learn what's going on out on the street so she could then become a nurse and save lives. And her life was taken unjustifiably and tragically and violently. And it brings me to, you know, the 8 minutes and 46 seconds that America witnessed, during which an American man was tortured and killed under the knee of an armed, uniformed police officer. And people around our country of every race, of every age, of every gender, perfect strangers to each other, marched shoulder to shoulder, arm in arm, fighting for us to finally achieve that ideal of equal justice under law. And I was a part of those peaceful protests. And I believe strongly that, first of all, we are never going to condone violence, but we always must fight for the values that we hold dear, including the fight to achieve our ideals. And that's why Joe Biden and I have said on this subject, look, and I'm a former career prosecutor. I know what I'm talking about. Bad cops are bad for good cops. We need reform of our policing in America and our criminal justice system, which is why Joe and I will immediately ban chokeholds and carotid holds. George Floyd would be alive today if we did that. We will require a national registry for police officers who break the law. We will, on the issue of criminal justice reform, get rid of private prisons and cash bail, and we will decriminalize marijuana, and we will expunge the records of those who have been convicted of marijuana. This is a time for leadership on a tragic issue of unarmed Black people in America who have been killed.
Senator Harris. Vice President Pence, let me pose the same question to you. In the case of Breonna Taylor, was justice done? You have 2 minutes uninterrupted.
Well, our heart breaks for the loss of any innocent American life. And the family of Breonna Taylor has our sympathies. But I trust our justice system, a grand jury that refused the evidence. And it really is remarkable that as a former prosecutor, you would assume that an impaneled grand jury looking at all the evidence got it wrong. But you're entitled to your opinion, Senator. I think, look, and with regard to George Floyd, there's no excuse for what happened to George Floyd. And justice will be served. But there's also no excuse for the rioting and looting that followed. I mean, it really is astonishing. Flora Westbrook is with us here tonight in Salt Lake City. Just a few weeks ago, I stood at what used to be her salon. Was burned to the ground by rioters and looters. And Flora is still trying to put her life back together. And I must tell you, this presumption that you hear consistently from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, that America is systemically racist, and that, as Joe Biden said, that he believes that law enforcement has an implicit bias against minorities, is a great insult to the men and women who serve in law enforcement. And I want everyone to know who puts on the uniform of law enforcement every day that President Trump and I stand with you. And it is remarkable that when Senator Tim Scott tried to pass a police reform bill, brought together a group of Republicans and Democrats, Senator Harris, you got up and walked out of the room. And then you filibustered Senator Tim Scott's bill on the Senate floor that would have provided new accountability, new resources. Look, we don't have to choose between supporting law enforcement, improving public safety, and supporting our African-American neighbors and all of our minorities. Under President Trump's leadership, we'll always stand with law enforcement, and we'll do what we've done from day one, and that is improve the lives of African-Americans.
Thank you, Vice President Pence.
Record unemployment, record investments in education, and we'll fight for school choice for all of our minorities.
Thank you, Vice President.
I'd like to respond.
Senator Harris.
I will not sit here and be lectured by the Vice President on what it means to enforce the laws of our country. I am the only one on this stage who has personally prosecuted everything from child sexual assault to homicide. I'm the only one on this stage who has prosecuted the big banks for taking advantage of America's homeowners. I'm the only one on this stage who prosecuted for-profit colleges for taking advantage of our veterans. And the reality of this is that we are talking about an election in 27 days, where last week the President of the United States took a debate stage in front of 70 million Americans and refused to condemn white supremacists.
Not true.
And
not true.
It wasn't like he didn't have a chance. He didn't do it, and then he doubled down. And then he said, when pressed, stand back, stand by. And this is a part of a pattern of Donald Trump's. He called Mexicans rapists and criminals. He instituted as his first act a Muslim ban. On the issue of Charlottesville, where people were peacefully protesting the need for racial justice, where a young woman was killed. And on the other side, there were neo-Nazis carrying tiki torches, shouting racial epithets, anti-Semitic slurs. And Donald Trump, when asked about it, said there were fine people on both sides. This is who we have as the president of the United States. And America, you deserve better. Joe Biden will be a president who brings our country together.
Senator Harris,
and recognizes the beauty in our diversity and the fact that we all have so much more in common than what separates us.
Vice President Pence, let me give you a minute to respond.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate that very much. You know, I think this is one of the things that makes people dislike the media so much in this country, Susan, is that you selectively edit, just like Senator Harris did, comments that President Trump and I and others on our side of the aisle make. I mean, Senator Harris conveniently omitted, after the president made comments about people on either side of the debate over monuments, he condemned the KKK, neo-Nazis, and white supremacists, and has done so repeatedly. You're concerned that he doesn't condemn neo-Nazis. President Trump has Jewish grandchildren. His daughter and son-in-law are Jewish. This is a president who respects and cherishes all of the American people. But you talk about having personally prosecuted. I'm glad you brought up your record, Senator.
Thank you.
But I really need to make this point. When you were DA in San Francisco, when you left office, African Americans were 19 times more likely to be prosecuted for minor drug offenses than whites and Hispanics. When you were Attorney General of California, you increased the disproportionate incarceration of blacks in California. Yeah. You did nothing on criminal justice reform in California. You didn't lift a finger to pass the First Step Act on Capitol Hill. I mean, the reality is your record speaks for itself. President Trump and I have fought for criminal justice reform.
Thank you, Vice President
Pence. We fought for educational choice and opportunities for African Americans, all of our
Thank you, sir.
And we'll do it for 4 more
Thank
years.
you. You know, there is no more important issue than the final issue that we're going to talk about tonight, and that is the issue of the election itself.
Susan, he attacked my record. I would like an opportunity to respond.
Let me give you 30 seconds because we're running out of time.
I appreciate that. First of all, having served as the Attorney General of the state of California, the work that I did is a model of what our nation needs to do, and we will be able to do under a Joe Biden presidency. Our agenda includes what this administration has failed to do. It will be about not only instituting a ban on chokeholds and carotid holes.
Thank you.
Not only.
Thank you, Senator Harris.
I would like to go through.
These are points that you made earlier in the hour, and I want to talk about the election itself before we have to.
But I want to talk about the connection between what Joe and I will do and my record, which includes I was the first statewide officer to institute a requirement that my agents would wear body cameras and keep them on full time. We were the first to initiate a requirement that there would be a training for law enforcement on implicit bias because, yes, Joe Biden and I recognize that implicit bias does exist, Mr. Vice President, contrary to what you may believe. We did the work of instituting reforms that were about investing in reentry. This is the work that we have done and the work we will do going forward. And again, I will not be lectured by the Vice President on our record of what we have done in terms of law enforcement and keeping our communities safe and a commitment to reforming the criminal justice system of America.
Thank you, Senator Harris. And I'd like to I'd like you to respond first to the question on our final topic, the election itself. President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If your ticket wins and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what steps would you and Vice President Biden then take? What would happen next? You have 2 minutes.
So I'll tell you, Joe and I are, I think, particularly proud of the coalition that we've built around our campaign. We probably have one of the broadest coalitions of folks that you've ever seen in a presidential race. Of course, we have the support of Democrats, but also independents and Republicans. In fact, 7 members of President George W. Bush's cabinet are supporting our ticket. We have the support of Colin Powell, Cindy McCain, John Kasich, over 500 generals, retired generals, and former national security experts and advisors are supporting our campaign. And I believe they are doing that because they know that Joe Biden has a deep, deep-seated commitment to fight for our democracy and to fight for the integrity of our democracy and to bring integrity back to the White House. And so we believe in the American people. We believe in our democracy. And here's what I'd like to say to everybody. Vote. Please vote. Vote early. Come up with a plan to vote. Go to iwillvote.com. You can also go to joebiden.com. We have it within our power in these next 27 days to make the decision about what will be the course of our country for the next 4 years. And it is within our power, and if we use our vote and we use our voice, we will win. And we will not let anyone subvert our democracy with what Donald Trump has been doing, as he did on the debate stage last week, when again in front of 70 million people, he openly attempted to suppress the vote. Joe Biden, on the other hand, on that same debate stage, because clearly Donald Trump doesn't think he can run on a record because it's a failed record, Joe Biden on that stage said, hey, just please vote. So I'll repeat what Joe said. Please vote.
Thank you, Senator. Vice President Pence, President Trump has several times refused to commit himself to a peaceful transfer of power after the election. If Vice President Biden is declared the winner and President Trump refuses to accept a peaceful transfer of power, what would be your role and responsibility as vice president? What would you personally do? You have 2 minutes.
Well, Susan, first and foremost, I think we're going to win this election. Because while Joe Biden and Kamala Harris rattle off a long litany of the establishment in Washington, D.C., an establishment that Joe Biden's been a part of for 47 years, President Donald Trump has launched a movement of everyday Americans from every walk of life. And I have every confidence that those same Americans that delivered that historic victory in 2016, they see this president's record where we rebuild our military, we revived our economy through tax cuts and rolling back regulation, fighting for fair trade, unleashing American energy. We appointed conservatives to our federal courts at every level. And we stood with the men and women of law enforcement every single day. And I think that movement of Americans has only grown stronger in the last 4 years. When you talk about accepting the outcome of the election, I must tell you, Senator, your party has spent the last 3.5 years trying to overturn the results of the last election. It's amazing. When Joe Biden was vice president of the United States, the FBI actually spied on President Trump and my campaign. I mean, there were documents released this week that the CIA actually made a referral to the FBI documenting that those allegations were coming from the Hillary Clinton campaign. And of course, we've all seen the avalanche, what you put the country through for the better part of 3 years until it was found that there was no obstruction, no collusion, case closed. And then, Senator Harris, you and your colleagues in the Congress tried to impeach the President of the United States over a phone call. And now Hillary Clinton has actually said to Joe Biden that in her words, under no circumstances should he concede the election. So let me just say, I think we're going to win this election. President Trump and I are fighting every day in courthouses to prevent Joe Biden and Kamala Harris from changing the rules and creating this universal mail-in voting that will create a massive opportunity for voter fraud. And we have a free and fair election. We know we're going to have confidence in it. And I believe in all my heart that President Donald Trump's going to be reelected for 4 more years.
You know, I've written all the questions that I've asked tonight, but for the final question of the debate, I'd like to read a question that someone else wrote. The Utah Debate Commission asked students in the state to write essays about what they would like to ask you. And I want to close tonight's debate with the question posed by Brecklin Brown. She's an 8th grader at Springville Junior High in Springville, Utah. And here's what she wrote, quote, "When I watch the news, all I see is arguing between Democrats and Republicans. When I watch the news, all I see is citizen fighting against citizen. When I watch the news, all I see are 2 candidates from opposing parties trying to tear each other down. If our leaders can't get along, How are the citizens supposed to get along? And then she added, your examples could make all the difference to bring us together, end quote. So to each of you in turn, I'd like you to take 1 minute and respond to Brecklin. Vice President Pence, you have 1 minute.
Brecklin, it's a wonderful question. And let me just commend you for taking an interest in public life. I started following the news when I was very young. And in America, we believe in a free and open exchange of debate. And we celebrate that. And it's how we've created literally the freest and most prosperous nation in the history of the world. But I would tell you that don't assume that what you're seeing on your local news networks is synonymous with the American people. You know, I look at the relationship between Justice Ruth Bader Ginsburg, the late justice who we just lost from the Supreme Court, and the late Justice Antonin Scalia. They were on polar opposites on the Supreme Court of the United States, one very liberal, one very conservative. But what's been learned since her passing was the two of them and their families were the very closest of friends. I mean, here in America, we can disagree. We can debate vigorously, as Senator Harris and I have on this stage tonight. But when the debate is over, we come together as Americans. And that's what people do in big cities and small towns all across this country. So I just want to encourage you, Brecklin. I want to tell you that we're going to work every day to have government as good as our people. And the American people each and every day love a good debate. We love a good argument. But we always come together and are always there for one another.
Thank you,
in
Vice
times of
President.
need. And we've especially learned that
Thank you,
through
Mr.
the
Vice President.
difficulties of this year.
Senator Harris, what would you say to Brecklin?
First of all, I love hearing from our young leaders. And when I hear her words, when I hear your words, Brecklin, I know our future is bright because it is that perspective on who we are and who we should be that is a sign of leadership and is something we should all aspire to be. And that, you know, that brings me to Joe. Joe Biden, one of the reasons that Joe decided to run for president is after Charlottesville, which we talked about earlier. It so troubled him and upset him like it did all of us, that there was that kind of hate and division. What propelled Joe to run for president was to see that over the course of the last 4 years, what Brecklin described has been happening. Joe has a long-standing reputation of working across the aisle and working in a bipartisan way. And that's what he's going to do as president. Joe Biden has a history of lifting people up and fighting for their dignity. I mean, you have to know Joe's story to know that Joe has known pain, he has known suffering, and he has known love. And so, Brecklin, when you think about the future, I do believe the future is bright. And it will be because of your leadership, and it will be because we fight for each person's voice through their vote, and we get engaged in this election because you have the ability through your work and through eventually your vote
Thank you,
to
Senator
determine
Harris.
the future of our country and what its leadership looks like.
Thank you, Senator Harris. Thank you, Vice President Pence. Thank you so much for being with us tonight. We want to thank also the University of Utah for its hospitality, and most of all, our thanks to all the Americans who watched this debate tonight. Again, our best wishes for a quick recovery to President Trump, the First Lady, and everyone who is battling COVID-19. The second presidential debate is next week on October 15th, a town hall-style debate in Miami. We hope you'll join us then. Good evening.
Your political reporters covering a serious medical and health issue, and they're simply not up to the task.
There's a lot of confusion and misinformation.
They were wrong about masks. They were wrong about ventilators. They were wrong about the curve.
In today's world, there's no time for misinformation.
The media's coverage of the coronavirus has been completely lopsided.
And agendas.
They're putting out lies and propaganda.
Many studies, by the way, that the media never covered.
This is why people don't trust the media.
The American people want one thing:
truth.
I've dug out the facts.
These are facts.
This is cold hard facts.
You need someone you can trust with no liberal media bias.
We cannot allow the Democrats and the media to strip away our God-given rights.
At Blaze TV, we know the mainstream media is a joke,
Where are you getting this information? Is it the mainstream media?
and we're not afraid to say it.
They all are left-wing hacks.
You, Chris Cuomo, you are a communist sympathizer and you hate the United States of America.
I have to show you how disingenuous CNN is absolutely being here. It's really incredible.
How much more is this country going to take?
If you're tired of the mainstream media bullshit, join us today. We are Blaze TV.
Holy cow. I don't know about you, but I didn't feel comfortable with just the plexiglass. So I have been sealed in our isolation chamber, and I, of course, have been wearing the mask. But now that the debate is over, I think it's safe enough to come on out and talk a little bit about the most important debate in the history of the world. We've got some great guests, including Don Jr., joining us in just a minute. Hello, America, and welcome to Blaze TV's coverage of the vice presidential debate. My commentary, I'm going to give you just a few highlights. Then we have Don Jr. Going to be joining us from Dallas in just a minute. Also, Dave Rubin. Don's ready to go. I thought we would have to stall for a few minutes, but he's ready to go. Donald Trump Jr. Before I say anything, let me get your reaction. What'd you think?
Man, he just destroyed her, and he did it with a smile on his face. He had an answer for everything. He called out the lies when it was appropriate. He kept his cool. He pointed out to the cold hard facts of Joe Biden's failed 47 years in the Washington D.C. swamp. He called out Kamala Harris's disastrous uber leftist record in the Senate and the disaster that would mean for the American people. And he did it with a smile on his face, and you could see just the cringe on that, just the least authentic person in probably American politics, if not just America, period, Kamala Harris, and she's just getting destroyed by this guy who just did it in the nicest possible way. It was amazing.
I will tell you, she is, in a very short burst, she seems likable. But the longer you watch her, the more unlikable. If I saw her one more time say, I'm speaking. Yeah, she tries to do the I'm cute thing, but she overplays it.
Oh. It's sort of like the fake laugh when she laughs for no reason, and you have that cackle. When she's laughing at something that's not a joke, that only she finds funny, that no one else is in on. There's really there's a failure of personality there that's truly sad. It's sort of embarrassing to watch, and I think a lot of that was present tonight. But I think more importantly, her refusal to answer real issues, the gibberish she gave us about what they would do about China and holding them accountable, and Joe's dismal record in China, where he sent American jobs abroad for decades. The fact that she wouldn't answer the question about stacking courts, which obviously means that's totally their plan. They're just not going to say it because it would be negative for them. But if they don't give an answer, at least then when they do it, they can say it's not a lie. So, I think all of that has been exposed, and the hypocrisy of the Democrat Party has been exposed. And honestly, I think she was just a terrible choice for BP, and tonight's performance shows just that. Yeah, well, Mike Pence did, I thought, an exceptional job holding her feet to the fire and still being kind and gentlemanly in his responses. I will tell you the thing that I liked about Mike Pence, and I thought she did a horrible job on this, was the economy. There was just no credibility coming from, and I wanted Pence to say, I want somebody to say, you guys said this is as good as it's ever going to get. We could never create any more jobs. You mocked Donald Trump for saying he was going to create. You said it was impossible.
Now we're expecting you to grow it?
There's no magic wand for that. Obama.
Oh, he
said
did
it.
say that.
That was their plan. So he actually brought it up. Mike Pence definitely brought it up. But that's the problem. The media will say, oh, they did a great job growing jobs. They inherited. They got an economy as it just started an uptick from one of the biggest recessions we've seen. A monkey doing nothing would have seen growth that they saw.
Yeah.
It didn't take anything to actually see growth. But if their economy was so good, and they claimed it was for 8 years because of their policies, how come Donald Trump was able to make it skyrocket the second he took over? I mean, it literally on November 9th, 2016, before he even took office, but when America knew that Donald Trump had won, when small business and big business alike realized that the person in the White House for the next 4 years would not be anti-business, would not be for excessive regulation, would not be for excessive taxation. That's when the market started skyrocketing. I mean, Obama gets credit for sort of the period between the election day and when my father took office at the inauguration. But consumer confidence went through the roof. It was like 1,500 points in the market because they finally knew they wouldn't have an enemy in the White House.
I want to play something. Kamala Harris said repeatedly that they would not end fracking. But I want to play something from Joe Biden, July 31st, 2019, the Democratic primary debate. Watch. You have it?
I don't see it, but I know exactly what you're talking about.
And so he says there is no place for any fossil fuels in a Biden administration. He was very, very clear. As Vice President Pence pointed out, it's on their website. The Green New Deal is on their website.
Yeah, it's one of her number one points. It's one of his number one points, but that's the problem, Glenn. That's sort of what we're up against. The mainstream media knows that. They're not as stupid as they seem, that they would neglect point number one or point number two of his actual platform on his actual website. They just know that highlighting it to the people of Pennsylvania, to the people of Ohio and Michigan and Oklahoma and Texas and places all over the country where that is a huge boost for the economy, where that creates lots and lots, thousands and thousands of good paying jobs, they know it would be a disaster there.
So
Pennsylvania, and say that he's not against it, even though it's part of his platform. They will let him have both sides of every argument. I put up a tweet about it literally during the debate because there are not just one example, there are literally countless examples beyond what's on his actual website, beyond what's on his platform, where he's literally reassuring people that he's ending this stuff immediately.
What does your dad have to do next week? And do you think Joe Biden is going to show up, or is he going to use COVID as an excuse?
I don't know. I think we got to be able to have a debate where, Joe Biden doesn't get to just spew lies, for hours, talking about fake records. I mean, they continue to bring up the Charlottesville hoax. One of the, other than the nonsense with Russia collusion, it's literally, probably the number 2 hoax ever perpetrated on the American people as though it's gospel. The media runs it. You saw it brought up numerous times last week. You saw it brought up numerous times. Literally, they get to say that the week after my father literally signs an executive order declaring the KKK is a domestic terror organization. But they can run with this stuff. And that's, again, the deficit that we face is we don't have the luxury or the benefit of having a mainstream media that will function as our marketing department, that will sort of, pretend we didn't do, just pretend that this is the case, allow us to get away with anything. We get fact check. They don't. Anyone decent, whether it was talking about, Joe Biden and his COVID response, whether the idea of keeping travel open from China, whether it's disastrous policies as it relates to China on a trade perspective, whether it's the disastrous handling of Joe Biden of swine flu back in 2009, where even Joe Biden's own head guy, because Joe Biden had a similar role to Mike Pence in leading the response, said, man, we basically got lucky because it was a disastrous response. We did everything wrong. And by the way, they forgot to replenish the PPE after it was over. No one talks about it, just like they don't talk about Hunter Biden and millions of dollars from China and millions from the Ukraine and millions from a Putin associate in Moscow. That's okay. They get a pass for that. The stuff that they dreamed for years that I was doing, Hunter Biden was actually doing. And now that the collusion is on the other foot, no one wants to know anything.
But
this is what we're up against, and that's why it's so important for the American people to see it.
So, but that's difficult because as I was watching this, I was trying to watch this as a low information voter. Somebody who's just watched CNN, MSNBC, generally votes for a Democrat, but doesn't really pay attention. They're not seeing any of the facts. How does your father break through? Because they probably weren't watching tonight. How does he break through?
I think he has to try with those facts and let them try to contest it later on. And that's our job, to be on the ground, actually bringing that message to the American people. I mean, that's why I spend, my days literally for the last few months traveling the country, averaging 4 or 5 states a day. Because again, we don't have anyone that's going to campaign for us like Joe Biden does. He has the media that will campaign for him. He doesn't have to leave the basement in Delaware, but for once every couple of days. We don't have that luxury. We actually have to get out there and spread that message. And then we need our people to organically reach out to their friends, make sure they understand what's at stake, make sure they're getting the true picture of the disastrous policies that would be the radical left agenda that is the Biden-Harris administration, or as Kamala and Joe both referred to it as the Harris-Biden administration.
I don't know what it feels like to be you and your family. I wouldn't trust a single person outside of my own family. I said today on radio, and I'd like to see if I was even close to accurate. They said that this declassifying of this material was the October surprise. And I said, I don't think that was the October surprise. I don't think that was intended as planned as the October surprise. I think Donald Trump was pissed that nobody is doing anything about this. All of this information is there, and he just trusts the American people, and he just said, screw all of you, release it. Release it and unredacted so the American people can see it. Was I right?
I agree. I haven't spoken to him specifically about it. I think he's been talking about it for a long time. And, the reality is this, you see that from the upper echelons of the FBI and the CIA, and they're trying to pretend that there's some sort of magical trade secrets. The trade secret is that they were all in on it, Glenn. The trade secret is that they all knew, and they did it on purpose. Is anyone in the world dumb enough to think that 27 high-level lawyers and prosecutors at the FBI all magically deleted their cell phones by accidentally typing in the wrong password 15 times? No one's that stupid. It is truly a sad state of affairs, though, when you have a country like the United States of America in the year 2020, when no one in the supposed free press has any interest in even finding out the truth now. They're actually rallying against transparency. They're rallying against transparency. You would think transparency is sort of part of their job description, but they're rallying against it because they know it hurts the Democrats who are in on it. They know it hurts these corrupted, criminal bureaucrats at the upper echelon of our intelligence community and our law enforcement community and the FBI. This stuff would never fly. If George W. Bush did this to incoming President Barack Obama, this would make Watergate look like a minor blip in American history.
It does, and they tried to say, the question was, when did the president know, and when did he know it, or what did he know, and when did he know it? That was the mantra during Nixon. We now have evidence and documents in their own handwriting that the President of the United States and Joe Biden knew about this, actually orchestrated this hoax with Hillary Clinton and the help of our intelligence agencies. And again, no one does anything. If the president is reelected, are we going to see people going to jail for this? Because we don't have a republic.
I sure hope so. That's the problem is, when they're like, well, it's your DOJ. Well, you can appoint someone to run it at the top, but if the underlings are all Obama holdovers and they're still doing his bidding, it's hard to get things done. You see that right now. You see that, frankly, in many of these institutions where they'll sort of start leaking stuff out. They'll make bad decisions that they know is against the will of the administration, but they'll put it out because they know it'll do some damage. And maybe the issue is small enough that it'll skirt under the radar, of the president who's dealing with a pandemic, who's dealing with China, who's dealing with Iran, who's dealing with, bigger issues. And so, that's sort of systemic in there. I think that's their hope. I think that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to stall it. You hear what's going on at the CIA, and the people there supposedly trying to stall this information. Why wouldn't the American people need to know this? These are American actors colluding with a known Russian spy to create a disinformation campaign that the president of the United States and his vice president, who's now running for president of the United States at the top of the Democratic ticket, they all knew. And we're not supposed to find out before the election. I think their hope is that, if they can maybe pull off a win, if they can pull the wool over the eyes of the American people and get a win, maybe this can just go away, because that's the history. That's what they've done. They've taken care of themselves. And frankly, Glenn, the Republicans are as guilty of it as anyone. They're more concerned about protecting the institutions of government, despite them being failed, bloated, and corrupted, as evidenced by everything that's gone on over the last 4 years, that this has been allowed to happen, that it's gone on unchecked, whether it's my father, whether it's General Flynn, whether it's Chris Wray at the FBI sitting on exculpatory evidence for years while they're trying to take down a 3-star general. This stuff can't keep going on in America. And if they're not held accountable, I am worried for the Republic.
Don, you had a fundraiser here in Dallas, and for the first time in my life, I wrote a check for a candidate. And when I put it into the hands of the GOP fundraiser, I said, I don't want this going to the GOP. This needs to go to elect Donald Trump, and the rest of it needs to go to the attorneys that are going to do the actual battle after the election. I don't trust the GOP, but as a guy who was, as you know, really not for your father, I have tremendous respect for him, what he has done. He is the first president in my lifetime who has actually done all the things that I not only thought he wouldn't do, I don't think any president would do. And we have to win. He's got to be
I agree. And
reelected.
I appreciate your support, and I know that's not easy to understand. And by the way, as we've discussed, in 2016, I could actually understand a lot of skepticism. If you were a conservative, if you were pro-life, if you were pro-religious, is the brash billionaire from New York, is he really going to fight for you? Is he really going to go to bat? Now, in 2020, the answer is unquestionably. He did it much more so than people who were much more vocal about these issues. By the way, not only did he do that, he got us out of endless wars. He's signing peace deals in the Middle East. He grew the strongest economy has ever known. He renegotiated failed trade deals that people like Joe Biden, who wouldn't know what to do with a trade deal, if they spent another 50 years working on it because they had no experience outside of government wherever done, he's renegotiated those. He's got trade deals done even with China, and he'll hold them to task. He's the guy that can bring us out of this. He's the guy that can do it again. And honestly, I understand the history there, and it means a lot that you understand that and you recognize that, and that you've been, frankly, so open about it, because that's not an easy thing to do. And it's amazing to see. So we really appreciate it. Thank you, Glenn.
Don, thank you very much. We'll talk again. And the best to the health of your father, and also Melania and the whole family. Thank you very much. All right, we have Allie Stuckey coming up in just a second. Also, who's on next? Dave Rubin is coming up, but we have Steve Deace coming up. Let me just take a 1-minute break here and tell you about Goldline. I don't know about you, but if the president doesn't win, I don't know what's going to happen to the economy. I have a feeling I know. Disaster. But it's why I have been working with Goldline for a very long time. And I know people have called me crazy and everything else for saying gold. The first time I recommended it, I think it was like $128 an ounce or $200. It was right around there. I don't know. It's worked out pretty well as an investment, but that's not why I buy it. I buy gold or silver because I truly, truly believe in the time of insanity and endless spending and Green New Deals, your dollar is not going to be worth anything. If the left puts us into chaos during this election, our dollar could spiral out of control. And somebody has to have something remaining to be able to help us build again. Call Goldline now. They're running 2 separate specials at the same time. They've never offered something like this before, but with the election looming, they want to give their clients a choice that they deserve. Call them now and find out about which one is right for you. It's evening, so they're closed, but you can leave a message, or you can go to goldline.com and enter your information. They'll give you a call back first thing in the morning. Please do your homework on this and call them, please. We have 4 weeks, I believe, to prepare. 866-GOLDLINE, 866-GOLDLINE, or goldline.com. Okay. We have Allie Stuckey and we have Steve Deace with us. Allie, first, let me get your take on how it went. What'd you think?
I thought Mike Pence did a really good job. He is the best surrogate for the Trump campaign that the Trump campaign has. He does such a good job of remaining calm and self-assured and respectful, while Kamala Harris is giving her sass the entire time. He remained composed, something that Donald Trump could not do. Donald Trump just did not have the timing with trying to correct the record against Joe Biden and Chris Wallace, but Mike Pence played it really well. I actually just saw a tweet that said Kamala Harris spoke for 4 minutes more in the debate than Mike Pence did, but you wouldn't think that because Mike Pence packed such a punch in every line that he gave. So I think he did a great job.
Allie, did you feel that way at the beginning? At the beginning, I was watching Mike, and I thought, oh, he's not really answering the question, and he's doing all the typical political, well, thank you. And, well, let me just first say this. It seemed smarmy, almost smarmy, just the first couple of answers. And then all of a sudden, he hit, and he was a different guy. It worked. Yeah. Did you feel that way?
There were a couple questions like that. There was actually one question where he gave like formalities and kind gestures to Kamala the entire answer, and he never actually got to respond to what she said. And I'm like, what are you doing? That's just unnecessary. I don't think that it's smart when it comes to him. I think that, no, it is.
It's just him.
Yeah, it's just who he is. But those pleasantries certainly were not given by Kamala Harris, and maybe he would have had a little bit more time to hit back if he didn't do that. But all in all, I think he did a really good job.
As a woman, how did Kamala Harris look to you? Because as she looked condescending, I like her for about 2 minutes, and then it just all falls apart on her. It was the opposite of Mike Pence. Right. The more time you spend with her, the less you like her. And the whole, excuse me, Allie, I'm still speaking. Okay?
Right.
That was so obnoxious.
Yes, I'm not just a fellow woman. I am also a woman who portrays my emotions and my reactions on my face, and who really has to work on not doing that at times when it's not appropriate. Sometimes it can be charming and funny when it is appropriate. A lot of times, though, it's just not cute. It's not appealing. It's not appeasing to the people who are watching you. That's how I felt the whole time she was talking, because Mike Pence was so respectful and deferred to her so much that her contrast made her look really petty and really insecure. And to me, it came across as embarrassed. And then I was embarrassed for her that she was overcompensating by these ridiculous facial expressions. So I understand the need to communicate sass sometimes, but I also understand that there's a time and a place, and tonight was not the time or the place for that sass.
Let's go to Steve. Steve, I want to talk to you before you leave. I need to talk to you about the latest poll because I want to get your opinion on it. But I want to first get your take on this debate.
Well, Glenn, I didn't come into this the biggest Mike Pence fan. I thought he really blew it on the religious liberty issue in his state as when he was governor. His task force has been a disaster with Fauci and Birx for the White House. But I think tonight, especially the last hour, I thought it was one of the most dominant and complete debate performances I have ever seen from a Republican on any running for any level of office. I think it was the JV versus the varsity. He completely outclassed her. You saw why she couldn't even make it to the Iowa caucuses. She dropped out 2 months before they took a single vote in the Democratic primary. She's just not ready for prime time. And after he bombed the opening question on coronavirus, he allowed her to get away with the lie that Trump called it a hoax. That's not true. Even AP debunked that last week. He let her get away with it twice, and I kind of rolled my eyes and thought, "Here we go." With my, this is kind of why I've got a bit of butthurt where Mike Pence is concerned. But after that answer that Allie just addressed, where he wasted too much time with pleasantries, once he dispensed with that and they got to the issues, and the pivot point of this event tonight was that when they pivoted to the economy.
Yep.
And that answer that he gave on the economy absolutely wrecked the entire Biden campaign message. And it showed what I've said for years, Glenn. When elections are about issues, Republicans win. When they are about personalities, Democrats win. If this is going to be a referendum on mean tweets and Orange Man bad, Donald Trump is toast. If it's going to be a referendum on whose policies are best for the future of the country, then the Biden team is toast. And it's up to the Trump team to make sure that they are on message so that the debate is about issues. And it was tonight, and it needs to be next week if they're fortunate to have another one.
I completely agree with you. The turning point was the second set of questions. I thought Pence would do a great job on coronavirus because he had the facts, he was there. I thought he just blew that. I was exactly where you were. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. And then he hit the economy, and he dragged the economy all the way through the debate. And it was, to me, it was so clear, the choice. But let me ask both of you, if you're a low information voter, you're probably not watching this tonight. But if you were a low information voter and you got your news from the mainstream media, why would you believe Mike Pence?
What I thought Mike Pence did well is he made the issues about the people and not himself. And I think that this is the razor's edge that Donald Trump is always riding, Glenn, in that he has not sold real estate. Real estate is not what has made Donald Trump a billionaire. It's selling Donald Trump that has been.
Yes.
He is the product. And that's both good and bad. And I say this as someone who also has, a bombastic personality that can grate on people that should like me, and I annoy anyway. So I get it to some extent. But I think Pence is not encumbered by the notion. There's more self-awareness there. He knows that he is not the product. And I think that he stayed away from rabbit trails that we care about, like Hunter Biden and stuff like that, for the most part. And he talked about issues that people cared about. The way that he hammered home, hey, answer the question. Are you going to disregard the Constitution and stack the court? He hammered home issues that actually matter to voters. And I think sometimes, you see that both sides have their own media bubble and don't often get outside of that and forget about the voters you're talking about. And that was my frustration when I was down there with you guys last week, is those are the people that are going to decide this now. And I don't think Donald Trump made himself accessible to those voters at all. I think tonight Mike Pence did a far better job of that.
So let's go to cut 28. Here is Kamala. Pence is very, very clear. Are you going to pack the court? Yes or no? Cut 28. Kamala skirts that question.
In 1864, one of the, I think, political heroes, certainly of the president, I assume of you also, Mr. Vice President, is Abraham Lincoln.
Mm-hmm.
Abraham Lincoln was up for re-election, and it was 27 days before the election, and a seat became open on the United States Supreme Court. Abraham Lincoln's party was in charge not only of the White House, but the Senate. But Honest Abe said it's not the right thing to do. The American people deserve to make the decision about who will be the next president of the United States, and then that person can select who will serve for a lifetime on the highest court of our land. And so Joe and I are very clear. The American people are voting right now, and it should be their decision about who will serve on this most important body for a lifetime.
Allie, is there anyone that talks down to people more than Kamala Harris? Is it just me? I felt like you know who that was. That was Abraham Lincoln. I just felt like, why are you talking down to me?
Yeah, she has an issue with that, not just with her words, but with her facial expressions. And that's exactly why she couldn't even win the primary in her own state. This is why she dropped out. I'm watching this. I actually predicted a couple of years ago, I predicted, I could see Kamala Harris being the Democratic nominee because of intersectionality. Then in the primary, I was so wrong. And I was like, how could I have gotten this so wrong? And then I was watching the debates and I was like, oh, I remember. She's so deeply unlikable. But this part made me laugh out loud. She stomped her foot and she laughed maniacally. And then she answered this question while in 1864. And she thought this was so clever. I thought this was the most humiliating point of the night. Worse than Mike Pence's pleasantries, worse than him avoiding the question on coronavirus and maybe missing some punches toward her. I thought this was humiliating. I had secondhand embarrassment. I was laughing out of embarrassment just because of her refusal to answer the question and her answer, which wasn't even a good distraction at all. It was a terrible choice to tell that story, just a terrible rhetorical choice. And I don't think talking about the voters and what actually appeals to the voters, I don't think that story of Abraham Lincoln, I don't think a lot of people were tracking with it. I think a lot of people were just really confused when she answered the question, are you going to pack the court, with, well, in 1864. I think people just lost her.
And it wasn't even related to packing the court.
No.
I mean, it was, she came at it, she was so excited. Oh, I'm glad you asked about history. That was a planned answer.
Yes.
Wow.
Right. And she was so excited about it because she was going to bring up a Republican that she knew. I thought it was weird that she said, I know that this is a hero of the president. Is it? I just thought that the whole thing was so weird. But you're right. The fact that this was pre-planned, she had to look down and read it. She got together with her staff and was like, this is how we're going to answer. This is how we're going to answer the court packing question. But I could tell she was a little bit nervous in saying it. So maybe she even was self-aware enough to realize how stupid it was. I don't know.
So you both have said to me that she's deeply unlikable. I agree. And the reason why she couldn't even be voted for or elected in her own state of California, she couldn't even win. So why did they pick her?
It's a very good question.
Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Allie. You want to go ahead?
Oh, I just have a quick, I think probably partly because of the intersectionality points there, and just to be able to have that kind of identity stake in this race, to be able to say that they have, the first woman of color. Actually, the first woman of color running as the vice presidential nominee. And so I think that's probably part of why it is. And maybe to appease the more radical part of the base, they're showing Joe Biden as the moderate, and they're trying to appease both sides with Kamala Harris. That's probably why they picked her.
I just want to point out, Allie, that you are a woman of color. You're just not the right color.
Oh, that's true.
Steve.
Just have a lighter shade of melanin. Yeah.
Yes. Steve.
To go to the Kamala Harris thing, first of all, she called their nominee a racist. That was her high point of her career. She got absolutely wrecked by Tulsi Gabbard, a candidate that they want to acknowledge is not even in their party. That was the last shot we had of her as a candidate. She had to eject 2 months before the Iowa caucuses had their first vote. And she's from a state that if Joe Biden just does this for the next 27 days and never says a word, he's going to win by 30 points. Other than that, she has a wonderful singing voice and was a tremendous vice presidential nomination. It's the worst running mate choice any party's made since Dan Quayle. She added nothing. Joe Biden was more popular with black voters in their primary than she was. She added nothing. And I go to the end of the debate when they brought up the racialist agenda, and I have mixed feelings, Glenn, at best, with the virtue signaling on prison reform and everything else. But that should have been in her wheelhouse. And Mike Pence took her own rhetoric, ripped off her arm, and beat her with it right there on the stage at the end. And that's amateur hour. She's just not good at this.
Okay,
That's just
so
the reality.
I need to end with this question for you, Steve. And Allie, thank you so much for staying up and being with us. But Steve, I sat with a bunch of political people tonight, and we were talking about how the Biden campaign's not going door to door. They're not doing a lot of the stuff that you're supposed to do. And we sat there and said, besides the possibility of them just cheating like crazy, do they know something that we don't know? Every step of the way, it seems like they're out of touch with Antifa and their support for the burning down of cities. They're out of touch with the Green New Deal. They don't really have a jobs thing. They're out of touch with the mandatory masks. They're out of touch with supporting all of the dictator kind of, moves. And then they're not doing, what do they know that we don't know?
Glenn, let me ask you a question. If you never looked at a single public poll about this election and only surveyed the environment of what was around you, Glenn, what would you think was occurring right now?
I would think this is going to be a landslide for Donald Trump.
Yeah. And so I think you got to take the polls that are coming from the same media that's lied to you the last few years about Russian collusion and what's a gender and what's a border and what's a criminal. And I think you need to flush those. And then you need to look at some of the polls that I think have had credibility in the past and look at their methodologies.
Well, wait. Tell me about Rasmussen, because that's the poll that came out today. Rasmussen has always been leaning Trump. It's always been the most positive for Donald Trump. What happened?
Now, listen, if Rasmussen is marketing, it worked. They got me to subscribe to their platinum package so I could finally look at their damn methodology, all right? Because I'm a cheapskate. I don't want to subscribe to anything unless it's Blaze TV, of course.
Right, of course, yeah.
So I subscribed to Rasmussen and looked at their methodology, and I got to their first data point, and I just stopped reading from there because they claim that Donald Trump today, in their poll that has Biden winning by 12 points, which, by the way, would be the most impressive victory for a Democrat presidential candidate against an incumbent president in almost 100 years, FDR against Hoover, all right? So they claim Biden's going to win by 12. Their first data point, Donald Trump's only going to win 76% of registered Republicans. Now, he won 88% of them 4 years ago, Glenn, when guys like you and I set out and didn't vote for him. Now, I don't know about you. I get around the country. You get around the country a lot more than I do. I don't know a single damn person that voted for Donald Trump last time and isn't this time. I know scores of people that didn't vote last time for him and are this time. I'm one of them. I know you're one of them.
Yeah, I am too.
And so the idea that he's going to get a lower percentage of Republican voters is just nuts. And to put that 76% in context, in the last 7 elections, the lowest any Republican has gotten of their own party's vote was in 1992. George H.W. Bush got 73%, but he had Ross Perot on the ticket siphoning off his own support. There is no third-party candidate here. Donald Trump didn't face a primary challenge like George H.W. Bush did from Pat Buchanan.
So how can they be this wrong this time?
I don't know. Here's what I know. What I know is I am coming on you. We're going to do a special show on Blaze TV where I will perform stupid human tricks if Donald Trump only gets 76% of the Republican vote on election day.
That show of you doing stupid, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. Not going to happen. All right. Thank you both so much. I appreciate it. All right. We have Dave Rubin coming up in just a second. First, let me just take a minute and thank Keeps for their sponsorship of this special program tonight, our coverage. And Keeps will help you keep your hair. I don't know about you. My dad went bald when he was a senior in high school. And so I grew up with a cue ball of a dad. And I mean, since I was like 8, I was like, I'm going to lose my hair. I'm going to lose my hair. I'm going to lose my hair. I was so paranoid. And when I started losing my hair, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be bald. Look at me. Imagine me bald. Bad. Really bad. May I recommend, if you have any of those feelings, or if you're starting to go, oh my, go to Keeps, keeps.com. You can just send a few pictures in of your hair. A licensed doctor will prescribe the right thing for you. You don't have to go to the pharmacy. They'll send it right to you. And you're done. You're done. Keeps, KEEPS.com/save. Make sure you use the /save. You'll save 50% off your first order of Keeps hair loss treatments. It's the same stuff. It's just generic. So you keep your hair and your money. Keeps.com/save. All right, we ready with Dave Rubin? Dave Rubin.
Glenn.
I'm happier today. I don't know if anybody watched it, but I'm happier today than I was a week ago at the last debate. I thought it was a bloodbath in favor of Mike Pence. Your thoughts?
Well, before we get to the debate, and that's obviously very important and what we're going to focus on, can I just say I'm feeling very good about my hair game right now, and the amount of product that takes to get that lift, it's a little lower than normal right now because it's been a long day.
Isn't it? It's like, did you ever go through that where you're just freaking out? You're like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be bald. I don't want to be bald. Please don't let me be bald.
Well, it's like an episode of Seinfeld. You know, you end up like Larry David, basically.
I know.
Look at the
but
neuroses.
I'd be bald and fat. All right.
Come on now. You've got a very nice tan. You'll be just fine.
Okay.
As for the debate, I mean, let me be very, very, very clear about one thing here. I mean, Kamala Harris has got to be the most unlikable vice presidential candidate, perhaps in all of history, certainly in modern times. I can't remember anyone as smug and condescending and belittling and someone who demands respect instead of earning respect.
Yeah.
The way she turned to the vice president so many times when he barely interrupted. You know, these aren't debates in the technical way a debate is supposed to be a debate with real back and forth. They design these things to not have that, and this was doubly not that after what happened in the presidential debate. But, you know, for the little tiny moments where he jumped in, when she would just bite him like that, it's like, man, people do not like that. And I said this morning on my pre-debate show, all he had to do to win was not fall out of his seat. And he basically did much more than that because he came off as someone that Trump is 74 years old. He had coronavirus. We know he likes McDonald's. If something happened to the president, we know that Pence proved himself clearly to be able to handle the job and be presidential. And Kamala, I mean, the endless litany of lies and the very fine people hoax that they just keep jamming down everybody's throat over and over again. It's unbelievable. It's just unbelievable.
So did you notice that neither one of them wanted to answer the question, hey, what happens if the old guy dies? Which I really thought Pence should just go, look at him. He just got out of the hospital for coronavirus. Look at him. He's going to put me into the grave. You know, and if he dies, if a president dies, the Constitution spells it all out. We don't have to have a conversation. Now, on the other hand, Joe Biden, I mean, I was surprised that he didn't take that on because Donald Trump does not strike anybody as 75 years old.
Look, I think we can all agree, you know, that Pence is probably not the funniest guy in the room, you know, but he had a real, you know, this isn't somebody that works on humor. He's definitely, you know, pretty scripted. And I think in this regard, his strength is actually being able to stay on message and kind of clear. And that's why he won. But I agree, if he would have just done something a little kind of sly, maybe with like a little bit of a wink, and just been like, you know, Trump just walked out of the hospital. He says he feels better than he has in 20 years. I think we're going to be okay. I actually think that would have shown a little more humanness with Pence because that is his one thing, that the stiffness with him, I think is off-putting to some people. But that aside, I think he completely mopped up this debate.
Oh, he seemed to have the facts, and he kept to the economy, which is really what the average person cares about. When you look, and I asked this earlier of Don Jr., the beginning of the debate, I thought, oh, Pence is going to look smarmy and just like, you know, a typical politician. You know what I mean? Where he's just like not really answering the question and, well, thank you for inviting me and thank you. And, you know, let me tell the American people. And I thought, oh my gosh, the first 5 minutes was just, I thought it was going to be a horror show. Then it changed. Do you think people who are like what you used to be like, where I mean, a long time ago you were, crazy leftist, but you're not.
It's true.
I
can't deny it.
Right, I know, but you 5 years ago or however long it was, you started to ask questions. And I think a lot of people are asking questions on the right and the left. Do you think there was a clear choice, or do you come to this with the bias of your own side?
Well, I would say more than anything else, it depends where you get your news from, because we are in a reality war. Why is it that Joe Biden can tell you he launched his campaign because of very fine people on both sides in Charlottesville, and then Kamala Harris can repeat that tonight? Everyone knows it's a lie, but when I say everyone, it's only everyone if you watch The Blaze, if you watch, shows like mine on YouTube, wherever, if you watch alternative media, you might see that right before Trump said very fine people on both sides, he condemned the neo-Nazis and the white supremacists, and he was talking about people on both sides of the monument debate and what you should do with monuments and statues. So the idea of the question really of, well, can you move people depending on where they're at beforehand? Well, it really is completely a function of what they're watching and what they're listening to. And I'm thrilled to say I know The Blaze has absolutely been killing it, which is why we upped our relationship and what we're doing together. And voices like ours are starting to come through. And I played the clip on my show, and I just tweeted it out, of Trump saying the thing about very fine people on both sides. And I tagged Jake Tapper, and I'll tag all of these CNN guys. Guys, do your job so that we don't have to. But you're not only burning down your own industry, you're burning down the Democrats alongside of you. And you guys all are Democrats. It's like, just do a little bit better, and then a lot of us would have to work much harder, I think.
Let me ask you the question that I asked the last two. What the hell do they know that we don't know? They are just marching down this crazy left road. It's coming unraveled at some point. If Donald Trump wins again, it's all coming undone for them.
Yeah.
And they're not canvassing, they're not going door to door. What is it that they know? They're so confident. What is it? Do they believe the polls, or do they know something we don't know?
These guys, and I know this from my days as a lefty, they always double down. When they're proven wrong by something, they use that as proof that they're right, actually. So it's like, if Donald Trump is president right now, which last I checked he is, you would think that they would have done an autopsy last time, 4 years ago, and say, is there something we did wrong here with the messaging?
Right.
Maybe calling half of America racists and bigots and homophobes wasn't the best idea. But instead, what they did was they doubled down on it. So I think, and by the way, this is very much a function of what critical race theory does. It's not just that you can be non-racist, you have to be anti-racist. You always double down on everything. And because they've gone so deep in that, and that, of course, was also the risk of calling Trump Hitler the whole time. If he doesn't turn out to be Hitler, you can't turn around and say, whoops, that was a mistake on that Hitler thing. I really guess I misjudged Hitler. So that's what we're up against. But, I'll ask you something, because you've been in this game longer than me. I mean, what I'm amazed by is this thing about the media and how they let the lies go over and over. Like, what do you think is going on in the mind of someone like Jake Tapper, who I think is at least somewhat decent on CNN? Not great, because nobody's great over there. But
I actually used to like Jake Tapper. I used to think he was very fair and reasonable. I worked in that building. I worked at CNN.
Look, you did CNN, you did Fox, you did the rest of it. Like, what do you think is actually going on in their heads when they know that the clips are there, and yet they refuse to acknowledge it?
I think they believe that they are right about Donald Trump, and they feel a little bit guilty about making such a big deal out of him and not taking him seriously as a candidate. They were mocking him the whole time. So they're like, we're not going to, they feel they have to correct their own mistake And they actually have convinced themselves that they are right. And as long as they're right that he's a danger, it doesn't matter. We have to find a way to get people away from him because we're saving the republic. I think that's what it is.
Yeah, I think that's probably ballpark right. I mean, I'll tell you one thing, Glenn. You know, the idea that Susan Page, you know it's tough to be a moderator. Sometimes it's tough to be an interviewer and you don't ask the perfect follow-up question or you drop the ball on this or whatever it might be. I'm always very upfront about that. I'm sure I've made mistakes in interviews. There's no doubt. But the idea that Kamala Harris, there were several lies she threw up there, including the tax thing as well, but that she could say the very fine people thing. And that Susan Page doesn't say, she knows, like, you know she knows. Everyone knows. So that would be just such an obvious one.
The suckers and losers lie. The Green New Deal lie.
The Green New Deal.
And I think that's
the fracking thing.
Yes.
He knows. Come on.
That's where Donald Trump lost it last time. I mean, Chris Wallace came out before the debate and said, I'm not going to correct anybody. Well, then, wait. So then they can just get away with anything, and then I have to correct. And I think he was pissed that they were just lying and Wallace wasn't doing anything. And I think he just lost it and was like, you're not getting away with that. And that doesn't work for him or anybody else.
Man, can you imagine what it would be like if there was no alternative media right now? I mean, can you possibly imagine? You know, we're in an information battle as is, and as I call it, a war for reality and a war on reality. But can you imagine if the ability for us to share these clips and have these conversations just went away? And by the way, big tech would be more than happy to take it away from us. I mean, it would be a world that you cannot even imagine at this point.
It would be
or
Russia.
You don't want to
it would
imagine.
be the old Soviet Union. Let me ask you one last question. I said the other day, when people say, you know, the capitalists are going to be the first to have their back against the wall this spring when we win, and you know they'll be facing
videotape it.
Yeah, and they'll be shooting us. I said on the air, you have to take these people seriously. They mean it. I don't think the average Democrat does, but the average Democrat is not running the Democratic Party anymore. I really believe, Dave, that you and we are going to have a .com for a while, and that you will have to know our address and go to us. We will not be able to reach out beyond our own .coms if we're allowed to have that. Do you believe that's what we're facing, an end to much of America's freedom and losing our voices if this goes wrong?
Well, look, there's no doubt that is what we are staring in the face. You know, every year that there's an election, everyone says it's the most important election. This one really feels like the referendum on does the American experiment continue or not. Yeah. You know, you can look back to any other election we had, Obama versus Romney, Obama versus McCain, George W. versus Gore. It's like, okay, they were basically in the same ballpark. Maybe one had a little more hawkish foreign policy or one wanted a little something different on taxes. But the basic paradigm was America's a fundamentally decent place. And we just have differences. I don't want to say marginal differences because often they're deep philosophical differences, but we have differences within the idea that this thing and the founding documents are good. What we are up against now is a force that says it is not good. And if you are a Democrat, and as you just said, there are good Democrats, if you are a Democrat and you believe that this experiment is good, if you think that Biden and Harris are the ones that can protect it from what's coming after them, I think you're just sorely mistaken. But I'll give you the silver lining on this, which is the more that social justice infects these systems, infects these institutions, infects these big tech companies, you know, ravages through the Democratic Party, it will destroy these things too. So I think the challenge for us and anyone watching this is to figure out ways to build better institutions and better companies, build new tech companies, build new universities, build new media institutions. We've been around the block. We can do it, and I have nothing better to do.
Yeah, me too.
I'm trapped at home. I have nothing better to do than save the world, you know?
My gosh, you're in California. They're going to staple that mask to your face soon. Dave Rubin.
You saw the thing where now if you're out with your family, they want you to eat and then put the mask on and then take the mask off.
In between bites, you're supposed. How are you still there, Dave? Move to Texas.
I'm a glutton for punishment, man.
Move to Texas. Thanks so much. God bless.
See you, Glenn.
Dave Rubin from the Rubin Report. Everybody you're seeing, in case you don't know, are all part of the Blaze TV, plus Mark Levin and Steven Crowder. I urge you, we need your support. You know, Dave just said, build a better media company. That's why I started the Blaze. And it has taken us a long time to really start to get all of the great voices together. And we're still just at the beginning. But if this goes wrong this November, I do believe we're in trouble. And you're going to need to come. You're not going to hear these voices anywhere unless you go to Blaze TV or a place like Blaze TV. If you'd like to subscribe, just use, what's the promo code? DEBATE, and you'll save $20 right now on your year's subscription. The programming is great, but the cause and what we're doing is greater, and we need you to have our backs. BlazeTV.com/Glenn. Use the promo code DEBATE. Let me tell you one last sponsor here for us, and that's Relief Factor. If you have pain and it's debilitating, you and I have something in common. I had pain for 10 years. It was so bad. I tried absolutely everything. I almost tried witch doctors. I almost did. I didn't think anything was going to change my pain. And 3 years ago, almost gave up and said, I can't do it anymore. And my wife said, you got to try Relief Factor. And I'm like, ugh. She's like, it's an advertiser on your show. And I'm like, yeah, but I mean, that doesn't mean anything. And because I wasn't taking it and I wasn't endorsing it. It was just an advertiser on the Blaze. And it's all natural. And I thought, that's not going to work. It's an anti-inflammatory. Oh, give me ibuprofen 800, doc. Slow down. That's a little strong. That stuff never works for me. I am telling you, 3 years into this, 2.5 years into this, I have my life back and I'm out of pain. And it's because of Relief Factor. So just try it. 70% of the people who try it go on to order more. Why? Because it works. Do it now. $19.95 for the quick start. Just see if it changes you. Lose your pain, gain your life back, relieffactor.com. Okay. I was going to, yap about a whole bunch of stuff, but I've got 3 hours to fill, and I'm a little sleepy, quite honestly. So we will see you tomorrow on radio. Thank you so much for watching and supporting Blaze TV. And we'll see you tomorrow on radio, and then next week for the next presidential debate, which gonna be fun. Gonna be fun. Good night.
The mainstream media giants are dying. For too long, they believed they could get away with anything. Fake news, puff pieces, outright lies. But let's get real. Their old school BS is, well, old. We are Blaze TV, the only media platform committed to the stories, issues, and topics that matter to you.
Cut the police. Oh, that's genius. Cut the police.
The right to bear arms. The left doesn't believe in that at all, but they believe in free internet for all.
These people want to control your health care.
Blaze TV has the biggest collection of conservative voices you'll find anywhere.
It is unashamedly conservative constitutionalists.
And we're not beholden to anyone or anything except the truth. So rest in peace, mainstream media. Your time is up. Try Blaze TV for free right now at blazetv.com.